And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice.
They could have the reasons and purpose, they could have the energy, unlimited energy, but they don't know where to start.
A journey of 1,000 miles is made up of, single steps, but the key is to reward the harder steps, not the easier ones and not the ones where you get the thing that you want.
Our minds can be so powerful, but we are often limited by our way of thinking. That's why in this video, I'm talking with the top brain experts in the world about how to unlock the power of your mind. This will change your life.
Does the mind have 100% power over what the body feels?
No. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a significant control over it.
Say I feel cold in ice, right?
Right.
I'm in ice, it's 30 degrees.
Right.
Can I control my mind to say, you know what, this is actually a hot tub, and you feel warm, and you're feeling hot right now? Or is it too much physiological barriers to break through that?
To some extent you can. So I think that, the question that you're asking is a very important one. It's actually the question, which is, to what extent does our subjective narrative,
the story we tell
ourselves actually mean something for the body? And to what extent does the body actually mean something for the subjective narrative? So this gets into some areas of work that we're doing now, and so I do want to highlight that it's ongoing work. But I think, the old narrative, meaning 10 years ago, was that if you're feeling depressed, just smile. Well, if that worked,
right,
we would have a lot less depression than we see out there.
Right.
Now that does not mean...
Well, most people actually who are depressed just aren't smiling as well.
Right.
Like when you change your physiology, doesn't it also start to change the way you think about yourself a little bit?
The reason I call it a brain-body contract early on is that the brain and the body are constantly in dialogue. So, the idea that when we're depressed, we tend to be in more defensive type postures. When we're feeling good, we tend to be in more like relaxed and extended postures. All true. But it does not mean that just by occupying the extended posture that I'm going to completely shift the mind.
Right.
That's a first step. Think about like two interlocking gears. It's one gear that turns the other, but then they need to kind of dance together before you can get the whole system going.
So how do you get it to dance together?
Exactly. So there is one way in which subjective thought and deliberate thought is very powerful over states of mind and body. To answer your question, can you think your way out of the ice bath being cold? So a couple things that are important. First of all, just to go a little deeper on what thoughts are. Thoughts happen spontaneously all the time. Mm-hmm. They're popping up like a poorly filtered internet connection. But thoughts can also be deliberately introduced. For instance, right now, I can say, okay, have a thought that just decide to write your name, and you can do that. I'm going to decide to write my name, and you can do it. So that's a deliberate thought, which says that you can introduce thoughts. So I think it's very hard to control negative thoughts directly by trying to suppress them. Generally, they tend to just want to continue to geyser up all the time. But we can introduce a positive thought.
Can you think of two thoughts at the same time?
Probably not.
So you can only have one thought at a time.
Right, but they come very fast.
But it comes and goes.
Right.
So you have to constantly be intentional and deliberate about what you think.
Right.
Otherwise, and a spontaneous thought will pop back in.
That's right.
Based on your experience, based on sensory, based on how you're feeling or perceiving something, your environment, it's just going to keep popping in.
Right.
So how do we deliberately have a positive thought more often?
Right. So I'm a big fan of wellness, and I think it's a great community, but it tends to run in absolutes, and there aren't a lot of operational definitions, as we say in science. And what I love about your questions, you're asking for really getting to the meat of things, asking for the operational definitions. One of the most dangerous ideas in wellness and in popular psychology is that your body hears every thought you have. What a terrible thing to put on people. What a challenging thing. I don't think people should try and suppress their negative thoughts. I think there is great value, however, to introducing positive thought schemes. Now, the reason is not because I think it's just because I think so, but because there's actually a neurochemical basis for controlling stress and actually making stress more tolerable and extending one's ability to be in bouts of effort. And that relates to the dopamine pathway. So the molecule dopamine is a reward. It's released in the brain when you win a game, you close a deal, you meet the love of your life,
someone likes
your photo, the great love of your life, you complete something. But most of our dopamine release is not from achieving goals. It's actually released when we are en route to our goals, when we're in pursuit of our goals, and we think we're on the right path.
This is why a lot of people get depressed after they achieve a big goal, because they feel like, I'm supposed to feel something greater. I felt this thing for 2 minutes, and now that's it?
That's right. High achievers know to attach dopamine to the effort process.
To the pursuit, the day-to-day tasks, the growth, the lessons, the losses, like everything, right?
Well, and it can be to some wins along the way.
Yeah.
But growth mindset, which is the academic discovery and laboratory discovery of my colleague Carol Dweck at Stanford, is the hallmark of growth mindset is really two things. One is, I'm not where I want to be now, but I'm capable of getting there eventually. The other is to attach a sense of reward to the effort process itself. In fact,
Don't reward the result, reward the effort.
that's right. And if you look at true high performers, people that are consistently good at what they do, they don't peak and go through the postpartum depression and crash and come back, and their life is a cycle of ups and downs, but really people who are on that upward trajectory consistently, those people attach dopamine to the effort process. And actually, one of her original studies on the discovery of growth mindset was these kids that loved doing math problems that they knew they couldn't get right. So it's like the people love puzzles, but in this case, they knew they couldn't get it right, but they loved doing it. And incidentally or not so incidentally, these kids are fantastic at math when there is a right answer, because they feel some sense of reward from the effort process.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing about dopamine is that it's very subjectively controlled. We can all learn to secrete dopamine in our brain in response to things that are in a purely subjective way.
Our interpretation.
But it has to be attached to reality. So, one should never confuse
What is real?
Right. So if you're thinking about the effort you're expending. So let's say somebody right now is financially back on their heels and they're setting up a new business, for instance, and it's hard. If they can take a few moments or minutes each day to reflect on the fact that the effort process is allowing them to climb out of their hole potentially, that it's giving them an opportunity, that it's somehow they are on the right path, or if they're not in movement along that path, or at least oriented on the right path, they're not lying in bed all day.
They're taking a step forward.
They're taking a step. If they can reward that process internally, two things happen. First of all, the brain circuits that are associated with building subjective rewards and dopamine get stronger, so you get better at that process. And second, and most importantly, dopamine has an amazing ability to buffer adrenaline and buffer epinephrine. And what I mean by that is, there was a study that was published in the journal Cell, excellent journal, Cell Press journal, a couple years ago, showing that with repeated bouts of effort, we release more and more epinephrine. It's kind of adrenaline, but in the brain.
With more effort, we
every time you put in effort. So every time you make, for this, let's keep it, if I were to keep it in the business context, every time you write that email, every time let's see, it's a person who's a craftsman or a craftswoman, every time you're working in the shop and doing that, every bit of effort, you're taking a little bit of money out of this epinephrine account. You're spending epinephrine. At some point, those levels of epinephrine get high enough that you feel like quitting. It feels exhausting. And this was done in a beautiful study, actually, where they control the visual environments and they have the subjects exert effort. And they can control the visual environment, so sometimes the effort of taking steps and moving forward, this is actually kind of pushing forward and kind of swimming motion, would give them the sensation that they were actually making progress. And other times it was an exercise in futility, where they would just keep the visual world stationary and they would expend effort and they didn't think they were going anywhere.
My gosh.
Epinephrine's climbing, and eventually they quit. Now dopamine is able to push back on that epinephrine and give anyone the feeling that you could continue, and maybe even the feeling that you want to continue. And you've seen this actually, football is a good example. Two teams play, say the Super Bowl. Both teams are max effort the entire time.
Yeah.
Max effort. The team that wins suddenly, in a moment, has the energy to jump all over the place, party for days. They can talk. I mean, they
were
have
exhausted
energy.
right before
That's right.
then.
Well, that wasn't glycogen or stored energy of any kind, except it was neural energy. And what happened was effort is this adrenaline. Eventually, people quit. They just quit. The dopamine is able to suppress that. And so then you're expending effort, but you're doing it from a place of feeling like you have energy for it.
So we need dopamine to keep the effort going. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's right. Dopamine is not just about reward. It's one of the biggest misconceptions. Dopamine is about motivation and drive. It's like a jet that propels you along a path.
So how do we get more dopamine?
You practice subjectively releasing dopamine in your mind.
Like how?
Okay, so that's a great question. First of all, there are ways you can get more dopamine release through thoughts or through drugs or through supplements. I want to be really clear. There is a drug, there are two drugs actually, that will cause massive release of dopamine. They're called cocaine and methamphetamine. The problem
That's what
is,
gets us addicted because it feels so good.
the problem is cocaine and methamphetamine stimulate so much dopamine release that the drug becomes the only source. It becomes the goal
Of
and the
joy.
path. It becomes the path and the destination. And you look at people's lives when they do a lot of cocaine and methamphetamine, and that baseline on their life goes down very,
Because there's
very
no
fast.
reason to work hard at anything else because you feel good.
That's right.
And that's the greatest feeling you'll have. So why do anything else when you can have that feeling?
That's right. And if you think about, remember these neurochemical systems, adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine, epinephrine, they weren't designed to keep us safe from tigers and to hunt and gather or to build Fortune 500 companies. They were designed to do anything. They were designed to be generic so that depending on our circumstances, we could adapt. So in an animal context, an animal that, let's say, is hunting or it needs food for its young, it's going to feel agitation. That's stress. That's cortisol. It's like hunger. My babies might not eat. I might not eat. Maybe it's looking for a mate. It's going to feel agitation and start looking and roaming and searching. Foraging, as it's called in the animal behavior world. It's foraging. At some point, it might catch a smell of something, a potential mate or berries or a stream if it's thirsty. At that moment, dopamine is released, and now it has energy to continue along that path. Whereas there's a specific pathway in the brain that's involved in depression and disappointment, that if it goes to that place and it turns out it was the wrong path, there's a signal that actually suppresses dopamine so that you don't repeat that mistake again.
So you don't give up.
That's right.
You just don't repeat it again.
That's right. And those events that...
So it reminds you like that's not the path to go down.
That's right.
Interesting.
And we're sort of veering towards neuroplasticity here, which is the brain's ability to change itself in response to experience. Dopamine is one of the strongest triggers of neuroplasticity because it says those actions led to success previously. You're going to repeat those.
Don't do those.
Those actions led to failure previously, and don't repeat those.
So dopamine triggers us to stay on the right path.
That's right. So you asked, how do you do this? So to really make
Yes.
it concrete.
And is there such thing as too much dopamine?
Well,
If you're not on drugs?
so cocaine and amphetamine are bad because they
Yes.
lower the baseline on life. They make people very focused on things outside of themselves. That's the other thing that dopamine does. It can be positive or negative. But when we have dopamine in our system, we tend to be outward facing and in pursuit of things in our environment. You can look at somebody on cocaine and realize that that's the extreme version of that. But I love social media for the reason that you see the molecules in the memes. So it's like, get after it. What do sharks do on Monday? Or I can't remember the specific things. Or then they're sometimes it's just time to chill. Well, that's a different molecule. That's serotonin, right? And then dopamine is the get after it molecule. And epinephrine is effort. So if we were going to break this down really concrete,
Yes.
we'd say adrenaline and epinephrine are about effort. Just effort with no subjective label on them, good or bad. Effort, whether or not it's stress or you're pursuing something you want to do, it's exerting effort. Dopamine is about reward, but more so about motivation and pursuit of rewards. And then we'll get to it in a little bit, but serotonin is a different source of reward, but it comes from more relaxed states and it resets the whole system, and it's associated with things like sleep and gratitude and meditation, and especially gratitude. And then just, I guess, to round this out, the cortisol system is more of a longer term stress.
Yeah.
I now know, I mean, we've measured genetic changes, hormonal changes, neurotransmitter changes. We've measured immune system responses by trading fear for gratitude. We've measured gene expressions. We now know that people can signal the gene to reduce cancer and tumors, signal the gene to grow new neurons. We've measured this. Signal the gene for stem cells to go to damaged tissues and repair them. Oxidative stress gene signal. We've seen that in our students. Now here's the deal. After all of those studies in the last 6 years, you can't tell me you're too old to do this work. Can't tell me that. We got people in their 80s doing miraculous things. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this work. We got people that were at the end of their life, stage 4, and turn that battleship around. Wow. You can't tell me that you had too turbulent of a past to do this work. People that were really rough pasts that are now free. You can't tell me you've never meditated before. We have people who have never meditated before, the most profound mystical experience. Wow. You can't tell me you're too overweight, too underweight, too out of shape, too in shape. You can't tell me that anymore, because all colors, all races, everybody can do it. That's the cool part about it. And when you get a community of people together and you move them from one state of mind to another, there's this moment, and I can almost predict when it happens, the second or third day, where people just start hooking up. And then when they start hooking up, you know, we're seeing now in our events. I mean, a lady that was blind from birth, 5% vision, by the end of the event was seeing. I mean, wow. How do you explain that? We had 3 people in the last 2 events that were deaf that are hearing now. Wow. People with crutches that were limited, or walking without crutches and canes, spinal cord injuries, I mean, Parkinson's disease, in a week. Like, that's gotta be, like, wow. It doesn't wake you up to what's possible. And you're witnessing a tumor on a woman's thyroid that was there at the beginning of the event, is gone at the end of the event. I mean, wow. Like, you gotta scratch your head and just go, wow, the reality isn't at all the way I think it is, right? And so there's this humility that comes, like, well, I don't know anything, but I'm willing to go down, push the envelope a little bit more. So we're only as good as our ability to execute this, right? But as we get better at it.
Consistency of it too, yeah.
I'm all about consistency, and I'm be the first guy to say, do the blood test, do the scan, let's do the test to make sure that it's just not in your mind, it's in your brain. Yeah. Let's know. So now the evidence then supports it, the testimonials support it, and all of a sudden people now are beginning to wake up to what's possible. And just like the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was broken. Once it was broken, we pierced the veil. Everyone did it. So we're just seeing now this same thing. We've pierced the veil, and people are just all in. They're not 50% in, they're all in. And my goodness, we're creating this kind of wake and momentum, but not just for healing, but for creating new jobs and new relationships, new opportunities.
Abundance, everything, yeah.
Whatever it is that they want. People come to the work for all kinds of reasons, and I don't really care. But by the time they start doing the work, all they really want to do is give. Because when you feel so amazing and feel so great about yourself that you no longer want anything, the first thing you want to do is give. I mean, when we see that brain scan moving into coherence and those 2 hemispheres come together, and all of a sudden we see that heart just start going boom, boom, very orderly, and see the more energy going in the brain goes into super coherence. You can walk around and look at that person who's getting the brain scan, and there are tears of joy rolling down her face. She's feeling so whole that it's impossible to want. How can you want when you're whole? Now you feel like you already
don't need anything.
You feel like you have it already. That's the moment the magic happens. So she's no longer creating from lack and duality and separation.
Scarcity, yeah.
Scarcity. She's feeling like it already happened. And that's a very profound signal in the field. That's dropping a big stone in the water and it's producing some big waves.
And things are starting to manifest. She's attracting synchronicities, everything.
Yeah, now she's drawing it to her. So then, if you're doing that, to answer the original question, is that then if you keep practicing that, then you got to get up and maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. And it's just a practice. And as you do that and you start seeing all the fun things happening, it's not like, oh, I got to go create my life today. Right. You're like, I got to go because I don't want the magic to stop. So I just do it because I love the crazy, magical, wonderful things that happen that I would just never anticipated in my life. And so people are catching on to it, and they start coming for one reason. They want money or they want health, but it's not about your money. It's not about your health. It's not about your new relationship. It's not even about the mystical moment. It's about who you become in the process, because overcoming all those limitations to become somebody else, nobody can take that away from you.
Wow. And do you feel like you've answered those questions for yourself? Who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think, though,
Or is there questions you still haven't answered?
No, I mean, it's not that there's questions that I still haven't answered. It's just that I'm always changing my answers, because I'm not, I mean, even my definition of surrender, just from 6 months ago, is not even close to the same definition that I have today.
What's the definition now?
Well, surrender, man, is just greater degrees of letting go and trusting.
Everything.
I just like when my world is going sideways and my staff is just freaking out, I'm always like, oh, I'm just going to let go. I'm not going to control anything. They're like, what? The ship is sinking. I'm like, yeah, but I got to go against the chemicals, and I got to trust.
Because if you're going to stress in that moment and have anxiety, you're going to create more of that.
Oh, you're going to make things worse. So I just let go all the way. And you got to lay down the very thing you used your whole life to get what you want for something greater to occur, and that's not one bite. That's not one leap. It's a practice. And so letting go a little bit more and trusting. If you over surrender, that's lazy and lethargic. Right. If you over intend, that's trying and forcing. So there's this razor's edge between intention and surrender, right?
Wow.
You got to be able to
take action.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And surrender.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't want to get in the way, right? So, and that's just it's a lot of trial and error, But you figure it out, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you feel like your mission is right now, then?
Wow. So for me right now, I mean, my passion is these week-long events.
How many do you do a year?
We do about 10, just a little less than once a month, around the world, and it's usually about 1,000 people. And now what we're doing is we're doing this whole nother level. We're doing two really cool things. One is a challenge activity. And what I want to do is, we now know that our students can create a lot of brain and heart coherence, but they can do it with their eyes closed in a room with 1,000 people and soft music playing, and they feel safe. But now let's get them in a situation where that would normally elicit fear or some emotion.
Get them in the real world.
Get them in the real world and get them up somewhere where they're feeling a little uncomfortable, or they're being challenged through endurance. And let's see them create brain and heart coherence right on that spot. Like this is the moment. This is your life. Like you got to be able to do this right now. You can't say I can't. It's too hard. I can't do this. I'll start tomorrow. I don't want to. That's not the moment. That's what you do in your life. Let's put you there. And instead of just white knuckling and pushing through, let's get really conscious.
Surrender.
Let's get really present.
Yeah.
Let's create that heart and brain coherence, and let's work it. And then make the move when you're in that state. Rhythm through that resistance. Create that kind of coherence. And I was just at the Heart Math Institute, who we partner with, and we were Doc Childre, the guy that created Heart Math. He said it's all about rhythm through resistance. It's about that ability to create that kind of internal order when there's chaos going on around you. So what's the relevance of that? A person who's going through a challenge activity that's a huge obstacle course, and they have the belief that they have a spinal cord injury or they have MS or Parkinson's disease, and they never try anything in their life, and we got them up there. And there's people rooting for them, and they're in that state, and they're in that heart coherence, and they go through that whole course, and they've overcome. They're going to walk back in their life, and whatever challenges that they have, they're going to be like,
this is nothing.
This is nothing. Yeah. I've just reset the scale. So, and the other thing is that people move past where they normally can go. There's a liberation of energy. And that's available energy that just needs to be organized. So then they start organizing that energy, then they're doing magic. The other thing we're working on is non-local healing, what we call the cage. We get a person to lay down with a health condition. We get 8 people around them. We teach them about energetic coherence. We talk to them about the science that it's not matter that emits a field. It's the field that creates matter. Change the field, you change matter. We give them the science and the understanding, and then we let them go. And we have seen people, all kinds of healings take place in 10 minutes. Like, how do you explain that? How do you explain a person laying there who isn't even being touched and their entire body is moving in all these different directions with energy? It's incredible. So
Wow.
I want to develop that. Why? I want to get so good at that, Lewis, that 50% of those people that are laying down get up healed. We're going to walk into a city when we do a week-long event. We're going to call the Children's Hospital. We're going to say, send those kids with cancer down.
Wow.
We're going to change futures, right? And men, you talk about opening your heart, but if you think you open your heart, but when you get an opportunity to give, and these people have been working all week long. When it comes time to heal, they're not saying, "Oh, my back hurts." They're not saying, "How long is this going to go?
Right.
Am I doing it right?"
Transform someone's life, yeah.
They left those attitudes on Monday.
Yeah.
This is Friday. This is Saturday.
Sure.
They're hooked. They've been connecting to the field all week long. They're not in their analytical mind. They're beyond their body. They know how to get beyond their environment. They know how to get beyond time. So when it comes time to execute, they've been practicing all week. They've been in a camp. They've been practicing. So you get a group of people doing that together, and all of a sudden the energy. We've measured the energy of the room, and the energy of the room always goes up.
Wow.
It just goes up, and that's available energy to heal. That's available energy to do the mystical. So I just want to get consistent, and I want to get really good at it. And it's not about me.
You're not good at it yet?
We were making great changes in unbelievable changes in people's health. But before I step out into the world and say, let's go to the Children's Hospital in Toronto, and let's call up the oncologist there and say, hey, we'll never touch the kids.
Right.
We'll just lay them down.
Just want to hang out.
Yeah. It'll just be a half an hour. They'll just be laying on the ground, and then we'll be done. And develop a relationship. I want to be good enough that when we do it, that we're going to execute an outcome.
Yeah, there you go.
And that way we're beyond reproach. It's no longer a bunch of spiritualists doing this. There's a science behind it, and we now know it. Right?
Thousands of cases or et cetera.
Yeah, we've got tons of cases now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know the statistics. We're going to start doing the statistics now, and we're going to start tracking those
That's
changes. Cool. So then I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, yeah, we're at 30%. On the last 3 events, we had 30% remission. Not just like it goes away for a little bit, but it goes away and stays away.
That's cool.
And some people go into healing, they get in the cage for their knee problems, and they come out hearing better. That just happened to a guy the other day. He had a bad knees, and he went in to get his knees healed, but he forgot that he didn't think about his hearing problem. He got bit by a poisonous snake when he was like a 3-year-old kid, and always had hearing problems, wears hearing aids, the whole bit. He comes out of he said he'd never felt in that amount of love in his entire life.
Wow.
And that's the common thing that people say. The woman that got her vision back, that's not what she talked about. She didn't talk about the fact that she could see. All she kept saying was, I feel like a child again. I feel like a baby again. I feel fresh. I feel like I'm newborn. I feel clean. She kept talking about how she felt. Then she said, oh yeah, and I can see faces now.
Right.
And there were these 2 big flower arrangements on the stage, and she said, I thought those were guards guarding Dr. Joe the whole week. She couldn't even see the flowers. She just saw the form. And she goes, I can see the flowers now. But the first thing was how they felt. And he, the same way, he said, I was sobbing. I never felt so much love in my life. It wasn't like I was trying to feel it. It just happened. And he said, and I got up, and all of a sudden I could hear Dr. Joe talking without my hearing aids. And I was just kind of like, he's like, yeah, my knees were a little better, but my hearing's a lot better, So you never know, right?
That's
you
amazing.
never know.
Shoot, everyone's got to get in the cage.
Life is the C between the B and the D. Life is the C between the B and the D. And people listening thinking this guy speaks in tongues. This is like code.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint.
What's the B and D?
B is birth.
And D is death.
So what's life? It's the C, choice.
Wow.
Like, let that sink in.
That's good.
Life is a C between the B and the D, and C is choice. Life is all about choices, because you are sitting here right now, the sum total of all the choices you've made up to this point.
That's true.
And I'm saying, like, everyone, who are you gonna date? Where are you gonna live?
Isn't
What
it
are you
crazy
gonna do?
that you could be, you could be making all the right choices your entire life and make one wrong choice and set you in a prison, or make you go bankrupt, or whatever.
Or
fill in the blank.
Or in the opposite.
Right. You can make all the wrong choices and
make
make
one-
one right choice to set you on a path of greatness.
Because one step, if you're going this way, here to here, and you take one step in another direction, it completely changes your destination and your destiny. So the good news is, yeah, you could make one choice that takes you off tangent, but one choice or the right about who you're going to spend time with. What are you going to eat today? Whether you're going to move today, if you're going to listen to this podcast, if you're going to if you're going to focus on crisis and all the terrible things in life, or are you going to focus on like, wow, how people are stepping up and how they're doing other things. But the second thing I learned, besides out of my sleep, doubling down on skills and capabilities, I always tell people, don't downgrade your dreams to fit your current reality. Upgrade your mindset, your motivation, your methodology to really meet your destiny, the things that you want most in life.
How important are skills?
So important.
Acquiring new skills at any level.
Absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Even coming back to the second gift I got from lack of sleep, the second gift, besides doubling down on all my skills, was protecting my time. Okay, so here's something. When you have a finite amount of energy and you only slept 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours last night, you don't overcommit. And I find one of the things that drains energy from people, that makes them stressed out of their mind, is they are saying yes to way too many things. And when you lack sleep every single day and you're exhausted, you only do the things that you're supposed to do. Meaning that you don't have the luxury of saying, like right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be, no one else I'd rather be with than right here with you. And there's a power in that. So whether I got 3 hours of sleep last night or got off a plane last night, or I'm still doing this with focus, with energy, it's because I made the decision to do this. And everything, as you've heard, everything is like heaven yes or heaven no, right? Like if you don't feel completely like yes,
no,
then you say no. And here's the thing, a lot of people feel they're burnt out because they're doing too much. I don't think you're burnt out because most people are burnt out because you're doing too much. I think you're doing too little of the things that make you feel alive. You're doing too little of the things that really matter in your life.
And so you're saying yes to things that don't matter.
Exactly. So the second gift I got out of years of not sleeping was...
You said no to everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I only do the things that are important, because one of the lessons I got from spending time with elderly, because I lost my grandmother and I spent all the time in senior centers and nursing homes and training them and helping with them. The gift I got back, I always get a gift back from working with anybody, is I heard stories and so much wisdom of generations that have gone through, like real hardship, right? I mean, our lives compared to theirs is, now there's no comparison. But one of the things I do hear, because I do believe genius leaves clues, and when somebody asks me what's the definition of genius, I don't think it's IQ. It's not this number that you test at 8 years old and that's your number when you're 88 years old. I demystify, IQ and everything else in this book, that everybody can learn to be better in all these areas, interpersonally, with their focus, with their memory, everything. One of the things that I've learned is that with working with these seniors is that, there's a lot of regret at that place. When you're taking your final breaths, my definition of genius is pattern recognition, that you could see patterns. Like, someone who's, a genius at greatness, you see patterns in what, everybody who sits across from you, you see like they're doing certain similar things, certain habits, certain mindsets, certain drives, they're eating a certain way. There's a commonality with that. And so I believe genius leaves clues, and genius can be built, not born. And that's a big part of my training. But the other thing I learned from these seniors is these regrets, they come out, and the biggest regret always is that somehow they lessened or limited their life because of other people's expectations, because they were fearful of other people's opinions about them. They didn't date that person or marry that person because of what society would think, or they started a career because their parents wanted them and expected them to do that. And I'm here to remind everyone, it's not a pleasant conversation, but when we're thinking about our mortality, and one of the things that was the impetus for this book was, I had a near-death experience, like in a car accident, and it made me think about legacy and ask a new question. Like, I was like, wow, I want to get this book out, because shame on me if somebody's struggling and suffering the way I was, with distraction, with memory loss, with overload, overwhelm, not feeling good about themselves, and I didn't help them. So I feel like what gets me on stage, even if I am an introvert and shy, is that I'm focusing on them, right? And that's my focus. But the regret people have when you're taking your final breaths at the end of our life, none of other people's opinions and expectations will matter. What will matter, none of our fears will matter. What will matter is how we lived, how we laughed, how we learned, how we loved. You know, that's really what's going to matter. And one of my mentors, Dr. Stephen Covey, another great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits of the most highly effective people is begin with the end in mind. You know, and then the ultimate end is like when we're, you know, when we're passing. Because when you think about being in that box, that coffin, there's no room in there for possessions. And I'm all for people having toys and everything else like that, but there's not, you can't take that with you. And in that coffin, there's no room for regret. You know, one of the things I learned from Jim Carrey, and I'm dropping a number of names, and the reason why is because when you see their movies, you see, you know, Sonic Hedgehog, or you watch another Will Smith, it reminds you of the lessons. It triggers, so that's how human memory works. I was spending the day with him, and he was like, you know, Jim, I want to get really smart before filming Dumb and Dumber. I'm like, that's ironic, but that's really, you know, to play dumb, you have to be really smart to do that, right? And so I spent the day with him at his home, and we take a brain break.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. And we were at his home, we were taking a brain break, and we make all these brain foods during lunch, and I wanted to know motivation again. I wanted to get into this model about motivation, because I'm always curious what drives people, and I found out, I was like, why do you do what you do? And he was like, Jim, he was like, I act like a complete fool on camera, so extreme, because I want to give people watching permission to be themselves. He's like, my religion is to free people from the concern of others, because that's what limits us. And isn't that interesting how adults, what keeps us limited are sometimes the expectation. It puts us in a box, right? We don't want to look bad. We don't want to make a mistake. And yet children are really, they have this limitless mentality, right, where they could do anything. You don't look at a child, you know, for people who have children, they're learning to walk or talk. How many times do they fall?
Thousands.
Yeah,
hundreds,
exactly. And never after the 500th time they fall do they say, okay,
it's not for me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to walk. That's not right. But as adults, they take a Spanish lesson.
Fall once and we stop.
Exactly. They take a salsa lesson, and they're like, okay, this is not for me.
Too much embarrassment.
And I always encourage people to at least, I'm telling you, we have one life to be able to figure this out. So you try new things. The brain thrives on novelty, right? To build your brain cells, 2 things, just like your body: novelty and nutrition. And obviously rest and sleep. Novelty, you give it stimulus, you work it out, and then you give it nutrition to feed that muscle. Same thing with your mental muscles. To create neuroplasticity, right? All you need to give is novelty. You learn something new every single day, and then you feed it the right nutrition so it could build. But I would recommend everybody try something at least 3 times. If you feel called to it, I challenge everyone watching this, and even post it on social media, tag us both, because I'll repost our favorite. Try things 3 times. Number 1, to get over the fear of it.
Yes.
Right? Number 2, like, you know, karaoke, or, you know, doing stand-up or something that just to get over the fear of it. Number 2, just to get a little competent at it, get good at it. And then try it a 3rd time to see if you like it or not. Because we don't really find our passions. Like, we have to put ourselves out there and give ourselves stimulus, just like with kids. You know, we have a whole, we have a bonus chapter on how to raise limitless children. But part of it is giving them enough opportunity by giving them stimulus to see what they get drawn to and what they want to be able to develop. But my other thing with sleep is I just got obsessed about, you know, like, how do I honor my time, and how do I say no so I can say yes to the great things, right? Good to great. I'm going to recommend a lot of books, right? Because we have a book a week club, because we teach, you know, the speed reading program. 1 book a week will change your life. 52 books a year. Leaders are readers. But yeah, good to great. Say no to good so you can say yes to great. And again, I really feel like...
You say yes to great by saying no to a lot of things.
Exactly, because here's the thing, especially for self-care. A lot of people think that self-care is limited to body work and meditation. Part of self-care and self-love is when you say no, and when you say yes to somebody or something, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. I really want this to sink in for people, that part of self-care is when you say yes to somebody or something, that you're not saying no to yourself. Right? Part of self-care is putting boundaries and borders on your time, borders and boundaries on your heart, on your emotions, and everything, because it's so important. And part of self-care is also self-love. You talk about this so much, right? When you and I have had conversations about, you know, about your previous books and everything, it's just, you know, how can we fall in love with that person in the mirror who's been through so much but is still standing, right? Because I feel like no external source of love is going to match what your soul needs from yourself. Right?
Yeah, I've wanted to stop you nonstop for 20 minutes, but it's all so good. I wanted to go back to the choices we make. We talk about choices, you talk about habits, mindset habits, physical habits in here with food, the way you think, all these different things. I really believe that habits allow us to make better choices automatically, as opposed to, should I make this choice today? Yes or no? Should I make that choice? Every day we have the opportunity to make different decisions, and habits keep us on the right path to making better decisions and choices every day. The mindset, and you've got mindset, motivation, and methods, which is your whole limitless mindset process. The mindset will keep you on the right path. The skills, for whatever reason, skills I think is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
More than habits in a sense, because when you acquire new skills, you become bulletproof, limitless to any economic downturn, to any breakup in a relationship, to any career change. You become limitless when you have a tool belt of skills at your disposal. And it takes courage to create new skills. And it takes learning how to learn to get a lot of skills, because it takes time to master a skill if you don't know how to learn the right way. And I've learned all the wrong ways over the years, and found out for me that learning the right way is throwing myself in immersion of it. Within 3 months, going all in physically, tangibly feeling it, emotionally connected to it, getting messy. For me, that's what works for me. And when you have the skill, you have it for life. It's like you learn how to ride a bike. It might take you a few weeks, it might take you a month of falling a bunch of times. But I haven't been on a bike in years, but I know I can go back on it. Maybe I'm not as fast as I used to be, or maybe I don't have as much control or maneuverability, but I'm 80-90% of the way there. Same thing with salsa dancing. I learned it. It took me 3.5 months of misery, of embarrassment, of fear, anxiety, of stepping on girls' toes constantly. But now I can go anywhere in the world, not speak the language of the community, but I can speak the language of salsa, and I have it. And I have that skill set where I feel motivated to put myself out there. So same thing with public speaking. When you mastered it, it's like now you can go into a room, and even if you're not prepared for the speech, you can do a pretty good job. If someone said, hey, Jim, come up here and teach us something for 15 minutes. You've got the skill set. And I think that gives us confidence, that gives us self-belief with the more skills we have.
We've all heard the sayings, how do you, journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Or how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Or, there are all these sayings, and it goes back to the Bible and earlier, right? I mean, this is not new, these are not new sayings, but they're showing up in different forms. What's lost in those short descriptions, however, is that every step is not equivalent. If it were just that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, everyone would pursue their goals. Everyone would push back against adversity. You can read the inspirational stories as many times as one needs, and I do think inspirational stories are of very high value. In fact, I think they're vicarious dopamine. I think they give us the sense that we could, which then orients us to the world again.
So maybe it's possible for me.
That's right. So let's say, let's take the example of somebody who's...
but to finish that story of, it's not about just taking a single step and one step at a time. Is it because there's adversities every 10 steps you go, and so it's harder and harder? So it's not just
it's just very nonlinear. It's some days go, I know this from my scientific career, it's some days it's easy, some days it's hard, it's all over the place, right? So I think the thing to remember is that dopamine is this incredibly powerful molecule that allows us to buffer the effort process. It allows us to be in effort longer, and it allows us to actually eventually enjoy the process of effort.
And not think about the reward, but just say, I'm enjoying the process.
Right. Well, you just described the first step. The first step in learning to attach dopamine to the effort process, which is the key operation in order to succeed, is to be very careful about how much you focus on the end goal. Keeping the goal in mind is important for like a proper orientation. You have to know the ultimate destination. But if at any point we were to evaluate our progress relative to that end goal, or if we don't know what the end goal is, there's a huge gap there, and it can feel overwhelming.
And depressing, and I'm not good enough, I should just give up. What am I doing this for?
That's right.
And those thoughts will affect us.
And they're very realistic, right? Yeah. I mean, as Carol will say, and other people have said in the psychology field, positive self-talk, oftentimes, unless you do it correctly, you're badly wrong. You know, lying to yourself won't work. Saying I'm a winner, I'm a winner, I'm a winner when you haven't
lost
or you haven't won yet is great, but that's not the most effective use of these systems.
Well, you're also being out of integrity with yourself. You're telling yourself a lie.
Right.
You're like, and then you're losing your ability to have confidence because you're just lying to yourself.
Right. And if it's really extreme, there's a name for it. It's called delusional, right? right? And people will start to point that out, and then it becomes harder to recruit people into your goals. So I think the key thing is to attach that sense of reward to the effort process. It's saying, look, I am oriented in the right direction and rewarding the things you're not doing. I'm not back on my heels. I'm not just staying, in bed in the morning. A good example of this came to me recently. I have a good friend. He did 9 years in the SEAL teams. His name is Pat Dossett. And we were talking about, the Admiral McCraven thing, get up and make your bed. And, and they really do that. And I think the way it was described was, so that at the end of the day, even if everything doesn't go well, your bed is still made. Mm-hmm. For me, that's not that big of a reward, frankly.
Right.
So I said that, and I
love it though. I make my bed.
I definitely make my bed in the morning. But I mean, going back and seeing that at the end of a hard day, it's not enough. I felt like there was something else there. So I asked him. He said, "Well, it's very interesting because part of it is about not just making your bed, but it's the things you're not doing." By making your bed. You're not lying in bed and ruminating. You're not back on your heels.
You're not on your phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you look at, and you have spent a lot of time with people in high-performing communities, mainly through some consulting work, but what you find is that, we can all either be back on our heels, flat-footed, or forward center of mass. And when you look at people who are in these high-performance communities, they try and keep their center of mass forward. Almost through what seem like trivial things like making your bed or making the cup of coffee, but it's not just about what you're doing, it's all the things you're not doing that can put you down the path of ruminating or put you down the path of unhealthy behavior. So the key to this is, if we want to be very concrete, we should probably focus on actions, and I'll use fitness as an example because it translates to everybody, whereas people's circumstances differ. Let's say somebody really wants to take on a fitness routine. They hate running, or they want to lose weight in a healthy way, this kind of thing. So we've all heard the example, well, you put your shoes by the door on day 1. Day 2, you put them on. Day 3, you go out the door. Day 4, you walk around the block, and then, and then eventually they're running marathons. Okay, great, but to sustain that behavior, or even to make the behavior pleasurable and to give you energy, the key is to subjectively reward those steps. So it's not gonna be, let's say I go out and I run a mile, and my goal is to run 10 miles in a few weeks. The key is, as you're in the strain of that mile, the hard part, you want to tell yourself, this is the good part. This is the part that gives me energy. And I'll be very surprised if people don't actually feel like they could continue further. So it's a journey of 1,000 miles starts with is made up of single steps. But the key is to reward the harder steps, not the easier ones, and not the ones where you get the thing that you want.
Don't reward yourself for putting your shoes on and taking a step outside.
You could if that was a huge barrier for you.
If it was very hard.
If it was very hard for you.
But running the 10 miles is hard.
Right. Find the wall and push a little bit further through that wall and reward that process. So this is why I think reps in the gym, the final reps, like reps to failure, are usually not the best example. First of all, most people aren't doing reps to failure, and it doesn't translate to young kids and stuff where they probably shouldn't be doing heavy reps to failure, this kind of thing. What you want, however, is if you're going to go there, to think about this is the hard part, because that's when adrenaline, norepinephrine are getting maxed out, and that's when you have an opportunity to bring dopamine in and teach those neural pathways to slam that back down. And I don't want to highlight them too much because they are a very niche and specialized community, but you look at people in special operations, you look at the process, like the whole evaluation process of who gets in and who doesn't. It's really about putting people into stress and seeing who can not just make it through that stress, but buffer that stress. Reward the process through teamwork, reward the process of stress through some internal dialogue that has everything to do with not being back on your heels, not being flat-footed, but center of mass forward. And I should also be clear, I'm not talking about everybody being super aggro and always like,
work. Yeah.
In fact, if you're spending too much epinephrine, if you're too much of an adrenaline junkie, you will burn out eventually, unless you can find ways to recover yourself or to buffer that with dopamine. And the recovery process is especially important. There's a second reward system. So you've got the dopamine system, and I guess to really put a box around it, subjective reward needs to be done at the hardest portion of a process. The tough conversation with a significant other, it's like when it's really tough and that's when you want to start telling yourself, this is the good part because I'm not speaking, or this is the good part because
I'm not reacting.
Right, I'm not reacting, or this is the good part because I'm probably not doing it correctly, but I'm on the right path, right? They're upset, they're not feeling your empathy, this kind of thing, or you're not really understanding what's going on, you're getting frustrated. But if you tell yourself, this is the neural pathway getting ground in there, like really dialed in, so that the next time I'm going to breeze right past this. Yeah. That's really how the process works. Because remember, no one comes along and drips dopamine in your ear, even if you get $1 billion, or you win a Nobel Prize, or you win the presidency. It's all internal. These neurochemicals are all internal. And while some of them are designed to be released in response to things very reflexively, like food, sex, sleep, all these things will trigger these neurochemicals, we have this big forebrain which allows us to place subjective context on things.
How do you do it then? How do you bring dopamine in your brain subjectively through daily conversation with yourself?
So there's a process I'm going through right now where I'm trying to write a book, and it's hard. And I was told that the harder it is, the better I'm probably doing it. And I was like, great. And my editor's ready to kill me, and because I'm slow, and I know, and I'm a very slow person. I drive people crazy. I'm like glacially slow because science is slow, and I like to get things right.
You want to rush it. Yeah.
I like to get things right, but I'm very proud of the fact that everything we've published, I can stand behind. It was the best we could do with the tools at the time, and I just know that when I look back on a writing career or a scientific career, I want to be able to say, every journal we put it in was rock solid. Everything was rock solid. Mm-hmm. We had fun doing it. The relationship. So I go slow.
Yeah.
But as a consequence, what I'm finding is there are a lot of interferences these days. I think social media is great. I teach neuroscience on social media because I think it's important to do public education.
But it's a distraction too.
But it's incredible. And it's incredible how much time and energy it can take. So what I've started doing now is I turn off my phone and I lock it in a safe. And I experience extreme anxiety.
Right?
It's so weird.
Why is that? Is it because it gives you so much dopamine that when you're not having it?
Well, this is scary because I actually think, brief anecdote, on the weekend I was driving, there's a kid that I mentor, and I picked up my phone and I was texting while I was driving. And he said to me, this is really embarrassing for me, he said, I wish you wouldn't text while you drive. And I put it down and I realized, this is crazy. I know that my life and his life is far more important, and the lives of the people around me are far more important than any text message, which means I wasn't doing it rationally. It's just pure reflex at this point. So I don't think I pick up the phone because I don't even know what I'm looking for there anymore. It's just become reflexive.
Wow.
So for me lately, the longer I can keep that phone in a safe and write on a grant or this book, what I tell myself is the agitation is good. At least I'm not doing that. And then I find that as I start to write and I get into the process, I start feeling good about it, and I'll pause and say, okay, I have control. I have ultimate control over my behavior. I can put that thing away. There might be a nuclear war out there, and I'm just doing this anyway. I have control over my thoughts, my feelings, and behavior. So I tell myself that, and then I find I have immense energy, and all I want to do is write. And I kind of tunnel into the process.
Wow.
And I think that sometimes people need to write these things out for themselves so it's really concrete. I think some people are so unskilled at subjective rewards that writing it out is really powerful.
So what would you write out for yourself as a subjective reward for this experience?
As long as I'm writing, I'm on the right path. As long as I'm not writing, I'm looking at my phone, I'm not on the right path. Because for me, the 2 or 3 things that are most important for my career are writing grants, working on this book manuscript, and writing scientific manuscripts. I mean, there are other things as well.
And anything else that you're not doing is holding you back from doing that.
That's right.
So you need to be focused, center mass forward on doing those things.
That's right. So I don't do any jumping around, power poses, things like that. I will use tools to kind of ramp up my dopamine. There are certain songs that are really embedded in my emotional thing that go back to, when I was a, wild, skateboarding punk rock teenager that will get me fired up. And I think there's real utility. That's pure dopamine. That's just a dopamine.
Moments, but it's not sustainable. You have to subjectively keep yourself motivated, I guess. Right?
That's right. And then if I finish a chapter, I will stop for a moment and I'll just kind of smile and laugh at myself. I'm big on like self-reflection with humor and just think, this is crazy. my brain is under my control. There would be people out there that say there's no free will, but I do not believe that. I put my hands in a lot of brains. You stimulate certain brain areas, people do things. You stimulate other brain areas, people think things. Ultimately, unless you have electrodes in your head and someone's stimulating them, we are in control of our thoughts and behaviors. Wow. We can't control all of them, but my goal is to be as deliberate and non-reflexive as possible in life. That's my goal from when I wake up in the morning until I go to sleep.
How do we get to that place?
Little by little and by rewarding each thing. If you get up and I'll use the make the bed example, make the bed, you're not back on your heels, you make a cup of coffee, you sit down, you script out something in a journal, you exercise, maybe you call a relative that you think you need to hear from you or that you'd like to talk to. You do something in a deliberate way, just being deliberate and learning to push away the things that are trying to make you reflexive is so important.
Reflexive, same thing as reactive, or what's reflective?
Yeah, so there are two modes of brain operations. So now this is getting a little nitty gritty, but one is deliberate, where we're thinking duration, path, and outcome. What should I do? How long should I do it, and what's the outcome?
Deliberate.
Yeah.
Intentional.
And it feels like work. This is what people need to understand. That deliberate thought, deliberate action, writing the book, doing the workout you don't want to do, whatever it is, having the conversation, it's supposed to feel hard.
It's hard.
It's supposed to feel hard. But you should subjectively reward it so that you get better at doing that. So it's supposed to feel hard because it's associated with this release of these neurochemicals that create this agitation. The mental strain you feel when you're learning something is the trigger for neuroplasticity, for your brain to change.
Say that again, the mental strain you feel while doing something is the what?
Is the trigger for neuroplasticity.
Which neuroplasticity allows you to expand your mind to do more things.
That's right. So neuroplasticity is a process of taking something where there's duration, path, and outcome, where I'm working hard, I'm thinking hard, maybe it's a hard conversation, maybe it's a business plan, maybe it's a scientific career. And the goal of neuroplasticity is to make things reflexive so you don't have to think about them, right?
For instance, I just started taking Spanish class one-on-one, and it's extremely hard. It makes me want to say, why am I doing this?
Right.
This is going to take me years until I'm conversational. Who knows how long till I'm fluent? If it's this hard as like this stage, man, is it ever going to get easier? I have those moments every time I'm doing class. I'm like, this sucks.
Right.
Because I'm like, I'm 37. Can I learn this language at
Absolutely.
this point? It's so much easier when you're 5.
Yep.
Now it's almost impossible. I watched your video on this a couple of days ago on social media. And the video you talked about this is, yes, it's harder when you're older to expand your neuroplasticity, but what I'm hearing you say is like, it's the only way to live, is the older you get, you need to constantly be expanding it. Otherwise, you'll be going backwards.
That's right. So, when you want to learn something new like Spanish or a new physical skill, your mind shifts over, the forebrain comes on and says, okay, we're going to pay attention to things. And now what am I doing? And
I get so tired.
we start doing evaluative stuff to other people, to ourselves. And you can start using all sorts of examples like, wait, I was a professional athlete in your case, or I want to be clear, I was never a professional athlete, but you were a professional athlete. You've been successful in other regimes of life, but it still feels like effort, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that effort is because two things are happening. One is adrenaline, epinephrine is being released. So it doesn't feel great.
It's not fun.
It's like, ugh. And then, in addition to that, by bringing focus to something, you're recruiting a neuromodulator called acetylcholine, which is the molecule of focus. Now, it's important.
Which takes energy and effort.
It takes energy and effort. You feel it in your body and in your brain. And it tends to acetylcholine will highlight the areas of your brain that are active during that learning phase when the teacher's talking or you're talking and making that effort. It's paying attention to how you're moving your mouth, what it sounds like to you, feedback cues. And it's marking those brain areas for change. And then later, when you sleep or when you work out or when you're having a conversation with somebody, that's actually when the brain changes occur.
So not during the actual activity.
That's right.
It's when you're not doing the activity, resting or recovering, when it starts to expand or
That's
when it
right.
starts to
It's
grow.
So neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change in response to experience, and is the main way in which we go from deliberate action, duration, path, outcome stuff to reflexive action and thought. That process has two parts. One is the trigger which is in adults is triggered by focus and attention and even a heightened state of agitation. The more frustrated you feel, the more you're actually triggering learning. It's saying this is important, this is important. Because the brain just wants to do whatever it wants to do. It needs to cue itself to, oh, this must need to change. And then the second part is deep relaxation, meditation, in particular a form of meditation called yoga nidra, which we could talk about, but forms of deep relaxation, deep sleep, like slow wave sleep. That's when the connections between neurons, called synapses, actually get stronger. That's when the connections that you don't want get removed. And that's also in certain cases where you get new neurons actually born in your brain to help these circuits speak Spanish.
This is why in sports growing up, I remember I would go to like basketball camps in the summer and I would always learn new footwork. And I always just wanted to be like the fancy guy doing like whatever, finger roll layups or something as a kid. But then we would go to these basketball camps and we'd just work on the fundamentals and the footwork and like all this different stuff. And I remember being in the moment, it being very frustrating and challenging. I was like, I don't get this. And I would suck at it. But then the next day I would come back and I would all of a sudden like have it after a few times of doing it. But I never learned how to do it in the moment. It was always like, okay, I might have got it once, but then I fumbled on it. It was the next day or the next few days where it's like, oh, I can do this.
It just shows up.
It shows up.
It just shows up.
And that's because when the mind is able to relax, it's then making the connections on how to do that thing.
Yeah, so in deep sleep and rest is when the connections actually get built up. It's sort of like with resistance training, right? The gym is a little misleading, resistance training, because people get the famous pump, and so they get a visual glimpse into what they might look like later. But then of course it goes back down, right? But actual hypertrophy, the enlargement of the muscle fibers and the strengthening of the neural connections to those fibers is later when you sleep. So it's the same thing with neuroplasticity.
Yeah. How important is it for us to constantly be learning and challenging our mind the older we get?
Well, I believe it's very important for living a full life. And my hero in this, two heroes actually, is I would say Richard Feynman, the great physicist, who had a very playful attitude about learning. That's one thing that I really should illustrate. If you are in frustration and strain,
just have fun.
A sense of play is great, because in play you have focus, you have intention and alertness, and it keeps you light enough that there's that dopamine release. Dopamine is released in play for a reason, because kids and animals, young animals and young children, learn social interactions through play.
Yeah.
A puppy bites another puppy, and the puppy barks out loud. That's why they have those sharp puppy teeth, to say that's too much of a bite. Then they play a little bit more. They're finding the boundaries. They're finding the limits to which they can use physical force for hurting another or just for playing. They learn soft bite. Play in animals is an ancient form of sampling these neural pathways. And as adults, we tend to be more demanding of ourselves. We don't tend to embrace as much play. Richard Feynman is somebody who really incorporated a lot of play into his adult life. He learned how to, in addition to being a Nobel Prize winning physicist, he also played bongo drums. He learned how to sketch and paint late in his life. He did float tanks. He was kind of a wild man, but he had a lot of fun, and he was a lifetime learner. So I think it's important because it's a great way to learn dopamine release,
right.
And it's a great way to expand one's experience of life.
This is when I was in Poland with Wim Hof earlier this year. I took a group of like 13 guys, and we were all nervous to get into this ice tub together for 10 minutes, like up to here. And for the first 2 minutes, it was not fun. We were just like, this sucks, this is cold. But then all of a sudden we were like, let's have fun. We're gonna be in here for 8 more minutes. We might as well try to enjoy it. So we started chanting, we started singing, we started just in a rhythm together, like smiling, and it was like, it's more enjoyable. It's still gonna be challenging, but you might as well try to have the most fun in the challenge than just suffer, right?
Yeah, team and community, not by coincidence, is a powerful tool for buffering stress. Again, look at high-performing teams like SEAL teams or other special operations units. Team is a big part of it for being functional in the actual job.
It'd almost be impossible to do it alone if you're a Navy SEAL, right?
Yeah, there are other divisions of special operations where actually it's more focused on solo missions.
That's hard.
Yeah, and so there are people that are very good at that, but teamwork is a great way to buffer the stress response.
Yeah.
And so earlier you asked, is there any way to make it not cold? I guess the answer is no, but there is a way to make the cold not painful.
Right.
And so that's where dopamine intervenes. The other thing that's important, because we talked about neuroplasticity, you trigger it with focus and energy, and effort and strain, is, children can learn very easily. Their brain is hyperplastic, and very quickly the whole job of the young brain is to take things that it's taught and very quickly pass it over to reflex, including morals and beliefs and
automatic.
And this is what's scary is also, the things that kids hear and they believe and they're exposed to, those beliefs become reflexive. Now, around age 25 or so, the brain is still plastic and forever for the entire life, but then you need more focus and you need what's called self-directed plasticity, neuroplasticity. Self-directed meaning the only person that can change their brain for the better after about age 25 is the actual person. You can't force neuroplasticity on somebody, positive neuroplasticity. So the other element that's really important to plasticity is this deep rest phase. And it's associated with the release of the molecule neuromodulator serotonin. Serotonin is a reward molecule, just like dopamine, except that it's released in the brain in response to the subjective experience that we have enough resources. So when we eat a big meal, or we enjoy, even better, when we enjoy a meal with friends or family, and it just feels like one of those incredible evenings, you're reset. It's that feeling of being reset. It has an antidepressive effect. When we are, when you hold, if you hold your child or a partner that you love, or your dog, if you love your dog, there's this feeling of having enough. And so whereas dopamine is really the molecule that makes us look at things outside the boundaries of our skin, like to be in pursuit of things, it really is the pursuit motivation molecule. Serotonin is really about feeling like we have enough in our immediate environment. And it's so powerful because unless that serotonin box is checked off periodically, we cannot lean back into the dopamine outward pursuit process for very long.
So we need serotonin.
Absolutely.
To feel more, complete, whole,
safe.
Once
you feel, this is where people, I think that the go-getters get it wrong, no pun intended, where getting after it and being hard driving is really important. But we've all seen examples of this. I've seen a number of these in Silicon Valley, friends that did very well in tech, get to the point where they reach that finish line and then they don't have a whole lot of people to share that with, and they end up very isolated and depressed. And then they go through this whole cycle of trying to find themselves. And you need to balance serotonin and dopamine, maybe across the day, maybe across the week. I think in religious practices, all religions really, there's a kind of Sabbath, there's a rest period, for many, I think all of them. That makes sense because there needs to be a renewal, whether or not people have a religious practice or not. There needs to be a renewal,
a recovery
to recover the immune system. You can't drive the immune system all week. You need to recover it.
This is why I love sports analogies, because there's a preseason, there's a season, there's a postseason where you're really in high stress and emotion, and then there's a postseason. There's an off season for a reason. You can't be in season 10 years in a row. You've got to find time to relax and have a bye week. It's like if you don't have a bye week, you're probably gonna get injured eventually. So it's just like trying to create that in your own life. But why is this stuff really taking off now in the last year and a half? Because you've been doing this work for a couple decades now, right?
Yeah.
2 decades?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Almost 2 decades. And you've been in tons of documentaries, movies, you've been doing interviews for a long time, but really it's taken off in the last year. And you said, because now we have evidence about a lot of things that you're working on, the things that you've been believing for so many years that you knew worked for you, and you saw transformation with yourself. We're not going to go into your accident because that's in the last interview. But now we have proof and evidence and science backing all this. And how did that start to happen?
Yeah, it's a great dialogue because I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And if you rewind the tape 10 years ago, information was the thing that stimulated thought, stimulated new ideas. And as we learn new things, we make new connections in our brains. So as we begin to add new stitches into that three-dimensional tapestry in our mind, we're beginning to cause our mind to function in new ways. But the key then is to apply it, to personalize it, to do something with it. And 10 years ago, when I got in front of an audience and talked about the application, nobody wanted to step outside that philosophical, theoretical, intellectual realm, right? Because doing something means you're going to have to change something about yourself.
Painful.
Yeah, you're going to get uncomfortable, right? And I think we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And because of technology, we have access to so much content. And information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. They work together. So there's an energetic change, I think, that's taking place in the world right now where people are so informed that old models, old paradigms are beginning to break down, whether it's the medical model or the religious model, the education model, journalism, the economy, politics. It's all beginning to come to the surface because something else has to come out. And I think that one of the things that people are realizing is that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to do this or a nun with 40 years of devotion. You just got to understand the formula. And just like any skill or anything you learn, you got to go from thinking to doing to being. You got to take knowledge, you create the experience, and if you keep doing it over and over again, you start getting a skill or you start getting wise about how to do it. And you know that you know how to do it. Well, in the last 10 years, we have assembled a scientific team. And let's see if you can really make significant brain changes. I don't want those changes to just be in your mind. I want them to be in your brain. I want to be able to see before and after pictures to say, that person has a significant change after a traumatic brain injury or anxiety or depression or a cyclic mood disorder or a stroke. We want to see that there's been significant change. At the same time, let's measure your brain in real time and let's look to see what that transformation process looks like. And in the discovery, Lewis, of that process, we gained so much knowledge about what that transformational process looks like. In other words, I can tell you without a doubt that if you're analyzing your life right now within some disturbing emotion, that 100% of the time you're going to make your brain worse.
If you think about your life,
if you're stuck in an emotion, like you're frustrated, you're angry, you're fearful, resentful, and you're thinking within that emotional state. In other words, you can't think greater than how you feel. That means then you were thinking in the past because those emotions are a record or residue of the past. So we see people in the process of change that are analyzing in duality or polarity. That kind of drives the brain into higher states of arousal and further away from true change. So we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans, and we now know that there's a formula to create greater brain coherence, greater brain efficiency, to make your brain work better. And when your brain works better, you work better. At the same time, it requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion to begin to change your energy and to change your life. And nobody changes until they change their energy, right? So then how do you get a person out of resentment, frustration, into joy and freedom why would they feel grateful or joyful or free if the experience hasn't happened? So most people are spending the majority of their life waiting for something out there to take away their emptiness or pain or the resentment in here. Well, if they're waiting their whole life in separation or lack, then and we create reality, then the lack is driving certain thoughts, which is creating more separation and more lack. So teaching people then to begin to condition their body emotionally before the evidence takes place in their life is breaking a significant habit, right? Yes. So instead of living by cause and effect, now we're beginning to cause and effect. So the moment you start feeling whole and grateful, we now know your healing will begin at that moment.
Yes.
The moment you start feeling worthy and abundant, your wealth is coming. You're generating a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of wealth. And so
how does someone feel worthy though if they've always been told they're not worth it?
Yeah, well, so
or that's the story they tell themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not worth it because
Yeah.
she didn't say yes when I asked her on a date.
Right.
Because he broke up with me, because I got fired, because my parents left me. How am I worth it when there's so much evidence or story around a negative thing?
Let's stop telling the story of your past and let's start telling the story of your future. And people who aren't defined by a vision of the future for the most part, are left with memories of the past. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. So most people wake up in the morning and they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are memories that are tattooed in the brain that are associated to certain people and things at certain times and places. So the person wakes up clean slate, they start thinking about the problems they're thinking in the past. If you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, well, there's a possibility that your past is going to be your future. Every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So then the moment you start recalling the problem, you start feeling unhappy, now your body's in the past, because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So people reaffirm their identity based on the past, right? And it turns out that the redundancy of doing that, conditioning only requires an image and an emotion. And most people are unconsciously conditioning their body into the familiar past, into the known. So now if you're in the familiar past and in the known, you're going to crave the predictable future. Right? That's the known as well. And there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the eternal present moment. That's the sweet spot of the generous present moment. So you gotta labor to get that person beyond the emotions that keep them tacked or anchored to the past. And yes, it takes an effort to do that, but if you keep working with the formula, you'll reach that elegant moment where there's a liberation of energy. And now your body, as the unconscious mind, the objective mind, is not believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, because you're liberating the body from that emotional state. So you ask a person, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you so resentful? The moment you ask that, their brain is going to associate that emotion to a past event.
To a memory.
To a memory.
Yeah.
That's because they have nothing to look forward to in their future. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, it just means to me that you're more in love with your past than you are with the future. So how do you teach people to believe in a future that they can't see or experience with their senses yet, but they've thought about enough times in their mind that their brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that's absolutely possible. We know that. And how do you teach a person to select a new possibility in their future and begin to emotionally embrace that future before it's made manifest to such a degree that their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes in new ways ahead of the environment. Now, till their body begins to change to look like the event has already occurred. We've proven that that's possible. Now think about this.
So the more you think about your desired future, the joy, the gratitude, the feelings you want to have that are more positive, the more you think about it as a future thing happening, the more your body shifts now.
Exactly. So your body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now think about this. The stronger the emotion you feel from some condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot. And that memory now is embossed in the brain. It's branded in there. So then people think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And the stronger the betrayal, the stronger the trauma, the more the body's living in the past, right? So how do you reverse that? So now, if you truly got passionate about a future, we've all done this. You get a wild idea in your mind and you start holding on to that vision and you're preoccupied with it. All of a sudden, the thought in your mind becomes the experience, and you start feeling the energy of the future. Now, the stronger the emotion you feel from that vision, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind, and now you're remembering your future.
And vice versa, the stronger you pay attention to the feeling of the past, pain, you're going to create the pain in this moment.
Exactly. So it requires a coherent brain, and we now know that there's a formula for that, and we've got beautiful research to show that people can do it. They just have to practice. And it requires a coherent heart, because resentment, frustration, impatience creates a very incoherent heart. And when that heart becomes incoherent, you stop trusting yourself. There's no energy there. You stop trusting in your future. So then, if there's physical evidence in your brain and body, physical evidence to look like the event has already occurred, it's quite possible you'll be thinking neurologically within the circuits of your future, And you'll begin to feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion of your future. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. And now your state of being is living in the future instead of the past. Now, the moment you disconnect from the emotion of your future because of traffic or some coworker or your ex or whatever people come up with, now you're back to the energy of your past. And now you're going to start looking for it, analyzing, why hasn't it happened? Well, if you're feeling the emotion of your future, why would you look for it? Because you would feel like it already happened, and that is the place where the magic happens. So then you can't just do this, get up, and then return back to your old state of being. You got to maintain that modified state of mind and body.
How do you maintain it when life happens?
Well, let me finish.
If I punch you in the face right now, how do you maintain?
Well, of course. I mean, we all take blows in our lives,
Yeah.
and we all react emotionally. But the question is, how long are you going to react?
Right.
So then, if you can't mediate and regulate your emotional reactions, and those emotions linger for days, that's a
Years for some people.
mood, and then months, temperament, years, personality trait. So then the person's personality is literally based on the past. But they don't
Crazy.
know that because they're doing it over and over again, and it becomes a subconscious program. So now, if it requires a coherent brain and a coherent heart, then we have to train people how to self-regulate. So we've done thousands and thousands of measurements. We've partnered with the Heart Math Institute to teach people how to create and sustain heart coherence.
How do we do it?
Well,
Besides going to your workshop, what's the simplified version? I'm sure it takes more time than...
it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It just requires getting still, closing your eyes, putting your attention on your heart, changing your breath so that you move into the present moment. And when you slow your breathing down, you slow your brainwaves down. When you slow your brainwaves down, now you're accessing your autonomic nervous system. So then you train a person how to open their heart and feel an elevated emotion. And it takes a little practice. And just like a flower that takes time to bloom, it takes a little bit of time. But if you work in trading the resentment, the frustration, or the impatience for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness, and you keep at it, there'll come a moment where that system switches on, and now you're feeling grateful for no reason at all. Now, that's not a bad thing, because gratitude, the emotional signature of gratitude, means something's happening to you, something has happened to you, you're receiving something, or you just received something. So your body then, when you're feeling gratitude, is in the perfect state of receiving. So then that means then you'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to the emotional state of gratitude. If you're living in resentment, you're living in fear, you're living in impatience, you could say, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm with all you want, and that thought's going to stop right at the brainstem and never make its way to the body, because the body is
not feeling, or because why?
Because you're feeling resentment, and that thought that thought is not consistent with the emotion of resentment. Resentment has a different set of thoughts, right? In other words, once you start opening your heart, it begins to move into coherence. It begins to produce a measurable magnetic field up to 3 meters wide. Now that's frequency, that's energy. And all that energy, that frequency, carries information, carries an intent. So then when you're feeling gratitude and your heart is open, you're broadcasting energy into the field. Now,
frequency,
a frequency. You lay the intent of the thought of your health or your wealth. That frequency can carry the thought of your wealth. It can carry the thought of your health. If you're suffering, suffering does not carry, that energy does not carry the thought of your wealth. It carries a different set of thoughts. So then we're teaching people how to self-regulate, because if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated.
Right.
And you better know how to self-regulate. And you have to know the moment you disconnect from the energy of your future because of some circumstance in your life and you lose that feeling, if you're practicing it on a daily basis with your eyes closed, then the next level is to be able to open your eyes and do it right in the moment and be able to self-regulate and change the frustration from some experience in your life back to the energy of your future. Now, that requires great awareness and great effort. But if you have a community of people that are practicing this on a daily basis and they're connected to their future because that's where their mind is, they begin to want the future more than the emotions of the past. So we've done enough measurements now, Lewis, to know that we can teach people how to do that, and we have evidence that people can sustain it for 45 minutes to an hour. It's a skill now. They know that they know how to do it. So now they have brain coherence and heart coherence. Well, once the heart begins to become orderly and coherent, it acts as an amplifier and it drives energy to the brain. So now the brain is getting more energy once the heart is open, and then you're thinking a different set of thoughts. And those thoughts produce different chemicals for you to feel more of that. And here comes nitric oxide from oxytocin, and then all of a sudden your heart literally starts to swell. It literally begins to open up, and there's more energy going there, and now you're coming from a different level of mind.
What's the process of then learning how to master a new skill when it's challenging, when it's scary, when it's uncomfortable, when it's I'm excited to learn Spanish right now, but I've tried to learn for 20 years.
Yeah.
I took 8 years of classes.
Yeah. Okay.
I've traveled to different Spanish-speaking countries. It's just like, man, how do we learn how to learn something that we want, but it's really challenging?
Let's deconstruct this.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the key. So you mentioned two interesting words with competence and confidence.
Yes.
And in psychology, there is a competence-confidence loop. That the more competent and skilled you get at something, the more confident you get at it.
Of course.
And because you're more confident, you're more likely to do it, and you get better at it, and it gives you more confidence, right?
Yes.
And so if I could play
loop,
golf
right?
like Tiger Woods, I would be playing a lot more, and I would get better, I'd be more confident of it. I remember years ago, I get a call on a Friday evening, and I don't know the guy's voice. I didn't know to see the number, and I recognize it, so I pick it up. And he was like, you got to help me. We have this mutual friend, and this my speaker tomorrow in New York City canceled because of an emergency, and I need a speaker, please. And I'm like, well, this is not usually how
the night before.
Exactly. This is usually like a 6-month in advance process. But the mutual friend was a very close friend, and I was like, look, maybe I could help you, but what's the topic? And he tells me what the topic is, and I'm like, I don't know anything about that topic. Why are you calling me? He was like, well, he wrote a book. I'm like, so? He was like, well, my friend says you're a speed reader. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, can you come a little early and I'll give you his book? And then,
oh my gosh.
And I was like, this is going to completely
crazy.
I have to do this, but this is going to cost you, but this is going to make a great story. And what ended up happening was I show up at 10 o'clock, I read his book, and I give the keynote that afternoon. And humbly, it was the highest rated talk of the event.
Wow.
And I don't take credit for that because I've never, had training in public speaking, but when you understand how people learn, you could, present it. And so I read the book, I remembered everything that I needed to say, because I train a lot of TED speakers how to memorize their speech, and I know how to be able to present it in a way that's interesting and also sticks with people. But I say that because that's what I mean about, I don't have to, just like Will Smith, I don't have to get ready, I stay ready.
Yeah.
And that's the power of skill development. And if there's one skill to master, it's our ability to learn. It's called meta-learning. This book fundamentally was going to be called meta-learning, but people are like, oh no, they're not going to buy it if it has learning in the title, right? And but meta-learning is learning how to learn. And that's a meta skill, and it helps you to learn salsa or Spanish or anything else better. And so let's deconstruct how to do that confidently. We'll start with the limitless model. All right, so this book used to be a book completely on skill development, which was all methodology. It was everything that I teach about how to read 3 times faster, how to learn a language, how to remember names, how to do the things how to get to inbox 0, how to do the things how to be focused, concentrate, critical think, solve problems, all the important things that really is our life, right? But then when I finished it, I talked to friends like you and everybody else, and it was like, this is a really good self-help book, but if somebody found it just on the street, they still, even they know what to do, they still wouldn't do it. Like, how come you want to learn Spanish or something else and you put it off, or it takes longer than you should? Because method is only one of the 3 parts. And so this is the limitless model. And I want everybody to think about a subject or some area of your life where you're feeling held back. It could be your relationship, it could be you're not making progress in your career, it could be maybe in your physical performance or wellness. Think about one area where you're stuck in a box, all right? Now a box is like a cage, 3D box, and 3D is 3 dimensions. What keeps you in the box? 3 forces, and these are the 3 M's.
Okay.
And I want everyone to draw a circle, and in that circle, we're gonna draw a Venn diagram. You know what a Venn diagram is? 3 intersecting circles. And the first circle is your mindset, 3 M's. And I always alliterate everything because it helps you to be able to remember it better. First one is your mindset. Now, your mindset are your assumptions and your attitudes about something. Now, let's break that down. For me, functionally, what your mindset is about this subject, and I want people to make this very personal. Think about something, an area you're held back. This is what you believe is possible, is your mindset. It is what you believe you are capable of. It is what you believe you deserve is your part of your mindset, because that's a big thing. That's your thermostat, right? If somebody has a mindset of, like, I could teach someone the method of how to remember names, but their mindset is, I'm stupid.
I don't deserve to remember names, or I'm not capable of it.
Exactly, or I'm too old, or whatever it is. That's their mindset.
My brain doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Then the method won't take hold.
It won't matter.
Exactly. So this is the formula here.
So how do you learn to believe that you are capable?
So we'll go into this. Yeah. That's exactly what the book does. I take people through a process called unlimiting. It's a word that I coined years ago. Unlimiting is different than unlimited. Unlimiting is like the process of removing limits.
Limiting beliefs.
Exactly. Or behaviors, or habits, right? So unlimiting is an active word where you're redrawing the boundaries and borders of your life. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about advancing and progressing beyond what you believe is possible. That's what this book is about. Now, I apply that towards accelerated learning, so you can learn your languages and give speeches without notes and all that stuff. But really, it's a process of liberating yourself out of that box. So one of the dimensions that keep you in that box is your mindset.
Yep.
All right, and we can go deep into how to change negative beliefs and everything.
Okay.
And I talk about the 7 lies. Lies for me, again, is an acronym. Lie is a limited idea entertained. Because it's not true. It's not true that you don't deserve it. It's not necessarily true that you're stupid, but it's an idea we're giving energy to. We're entertaining that idea in that moment. And I show people how to unravel it in a 3-step process. But that's the mindset.
Okay.
All right. Now the second M, you can have the greatest mindset and believe everything is possible. You're capable. You deserve it. But if you don't have the second M, which is motivation, you're not getting out of that box. Right? That in your career.
I believe I can do it, but I'm going to sit here and eat chips on the couch.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so your motivation for me is your drive, it's your purpose, it's the vitality that you bring to something. Now, most people think motivation, they'll say motivation is a lie. And in some respects it is, because the way a lot of people perceive motivation is just rah, rah, get excited, get hyped up, and next day, nothing changes. So the evidence of motivation is something is happening. There's an action. There's a new action taking place. And if you're not doing that action, you're not motivated. No matter what you say, if you're not doing it, it's better well done than well said. Even like a lot of people on social media, they promise things, but prove it, right? Don't say it, show it, right? You take it to action. Because knowledge is not power, it's potential power. Applying it makes it powerful. So motivation for me is a 3-step formula. And here's the formula. And I go deep in this book because there's a chapter on each part. The key to sustainable motivation, how to overcome procrastination, if you're putting things off, this is the key. It's this: P times E times S3. Now, this is a formula for sustainable, not just a surge in motivation, right? We've all watched the Limitless movie where he takes a pill and he can learn languages and read really fast and remember everything. And Dr. Mark Hyman, who wrote the foreword of the book, who's a mutual friend of both of ours, and I know he's been on your show, he says that there is no genius pill, but Jim gives you the process for a brighter brain, right? like it's the process, and there's no side effects, right?
Yeah, it's good.
But going back to this, when he had a surge of motivation, but then when the pill wore off, it goes back to no motivation. But this is the key. There's no pill, there's a process. And these 3 things, P times E times S3, is sustainable for the rest of your life. Because I've lived on no sleep for over a decade, right? My sleep has gotten much better since, of recent, just some breakthroughs just in medicine and everything else like that. But, I had sustainable motivation. I was still doing all the conferences, still doing my podcast every week, still speaking and traveling and doing all this stuff, because I had these 3 things. Number 1, so the P stands for purpose. Now again, if you feel not motivated in any area of your life, some people can have motivation. Now some people are very motivated to sit on the couch and binge watch Netflix. They're highly motivated to do that, right? But if you're lacking motivation to work out consistently, and now here's another lie, limited idea entertained, is that you have to enjoy the activity, right? Like it doesn't mean that you have to do that. Like I was having this conversation with Tom Bilyeu, right? And he was like, I work out 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock every morning. I was like, do you enjoy it? He was like, no, I don't like working out at all. But he's motivated, doesn't miss a day. So he has the motivation. So motivation doesn't mean you enjoy it. Like every morning, I do my cold showers, like Wim Hof, right?
It's not fun all the time, but.
Exactly. I grew up in the Northeast. I hate the cold, right? But I do my cold showers or my ice baths. I post all the time on Instagram about doing it because I know I have a purpose, right? So I don't enjoy it, but the P in the formula is purpose. Reasons reap results. And if you get the reason, so even if I'm not, getting my sleep, I have a purpose. I have a reason to help people every single day. I want every single person that comes in contact with me, whether it's on my podcast or a video or a book, their brain is better off because of it. And so that's my reason. And really, you know my story. Like my first student 3 decades ago almost, she read 30 books in 30 days. And what was her purpose? Her mother was dying of terminal cancer, 2 months to live, 60 days. And the book she was reading, health, wellness, energy, right? Wow. And she ended up saving her mom's life.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that if knowledge is power, learning is our superpower. And I dedicated my life to make that kind of difference. And that's what, so I have my reasons to do something. So I don't have to pump myself up. So P is purpose, tap into your reasons. And it can't be intellectual. You have to feel it,
of course,
right? And you could even feel the pain. Like who's counting on you to do this activity? Who's watching you? Who's role modeling you, right? Who's counting on you to show up today? It can be painful too, but if it gets you to move, that's what's important. Have that reason, the purpose. This E, now here my mind does this thought experiment, scientific experimentations, right? If somebody just has a reason, are they always motivated? Are there any cases where they're not motivated? And I said, yes, if they're lacking the E, energy. So somebody could have a reason to work out, or they could have a reason to read, or learn Spanish, but if they're trying to do it late at night and they didn't sleep the night before, or they had a big processed meal.
It's hard to have the motivation.
Exactly, and they're a food coma, they can't be motivated because they lack energy. So in the book, I talk about 10 keys for brain energy. The 10 things that I do to light up my brain, and one of them is our brain foods. Another one is optimizing your sleep. So I do a whole area of what I've learned really moves the needle for maximizing your sleep. Because how's your thought process if you don't sleep? How's your focus?
Foggy.
How's your memory? How you're making good decisions, right? I heard that was the advice presidents give other presidents is like don't make a big decision if you didn't get a good night's sleep, right? So I talk about sleep. So in the book, in motivation, we do a whole section on finding your purpose and even life purpose and passion, and a whole area on optimizing your energy. Now you have energy to do it. I ask myself, okay, you have a purpose for something. To work out or whatever, you have, or to start this business, you have the energy. In what case, if you're like doing this critical thinking, in what case won't you be motivated? Let's say you want to start a business or whatever. You're just procrastinating on starting that business. Number one, you have the motivation, you really need it, and you know why. You have the energy because you're eating the right foods, you're maximizing your sleep, you're with not energy vampires. Yes, there is. S3. What the problem is you're making it too big in your mind. That will keep you from being motivated. Starting a business, like where do you even start? Or getting that perfect relationship or having perfect health, that's way, way too big. So what do? Small, simple steps. That's what will keep people unmotivated. They could have the reasons and purpose, they could have the energy, unlimited energy, but they don't know where to start. And because they make it too big in their mind. And a confused mind doesn't do anything. Confused mind doesn't do anything. So clarity is power.
I like that.
So small, simple step. All you have to do is ask a magic question. What is the smallest action I could take where I can't fail? It allows me, give me some progress, but I can't fail. What's the smallest step? And I cite the work in here of the habit experts that you and I have interviewed. Dr. B.J. Fogg's or the James Clear's Atomic Habits, and really my take on how to make sustainable habits, because what you do repeatedly becomes that habit. But it starts with a small, simple step. What's an example of that? I want people to read a book a week. It will change their life. I think if there's one thing that would change their life immediately, long term, it's just read every day. Reading is to your mind what exercises your body even more than audio. And my podcast, and I do everything on audio. I still encourage people to read because it activates a different part of your brain. Also, and I listen to audios when I drive, when I work out. But when the people are tested in terms of what they read, in terms of comprehension, what they listen to, reading the actual more, and they'll understand more. You know why? Is not only does it activate a different part of your brain because it's active, because listening can be passive, like watching a movie or anything can be very passive. You don't have to get involved, but reading forces you to get involved. But the second reason why is because usually when someone's listening to something, they're doing something else. And they're trying to multitask.
Yeah.
They're cleaning their house, they're working out, they're driving, so their attention's not fully on what they're listening to, so that's why the comprehension is down. But reading every single day is a great activity. But I don't tell people, read an hour a day. A small, simple step to get someone reading is read one sentence. That's a small, simple step. Open up the book. That's a small, simple step that you can't fail, right? And nobody's going to stop at one sentence. The example Dr. BJ Fogg talks about with tiny habits is, hey, we know flossing is good for your longevity.
Just do one tooth.
One tooth. And who's going to stop at one tooth, right? So how do you break it down? And really, motivation is energy management. It's really about energy management, meaning when you have clarity and purpose, it gives you energy, right? When you have energy, like if you eat the right foods and everything else with vitality, you have energy. And small, simple steps requires very little energy, requires very little effort, output. And there's something in memory called the Zeigarnik effect. It's by a psychologist, a woman who in Europe noticed that at the cafe she frequents, that the waitstaff would remember all the orders until they were delivered. And once they were delivered, they would forget it. And the Zeigarnik effect, which is her last name, means that the mind doesn't like open loops. So and all of the series that you binge watch knows this, because at the end they open up a loop.
Yes.
And you're like, one more. Who does that? Like one more. And you end up watching until like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. because it doesn't like the open loops. Well, starting something like an order, remembering someone's order, and then it delivered, it closes the loop. Well, when you start something anywhere, your mind still keeps an open loop about it, so it's more likely to finish. And that's another way to overcome procrastination. Break it down into small, simple steps where you can't fail.
Yeah.
That's the 3-step formula. So I do a chapter, so this is really 3 books in one. It's a whole book on mindset, on how to eliminate negative self-talk, how to be able to get rid of negative beliefs that you don't deserve it, you're not capable of it, how to have optimization. So a chapter on purpose, a chapter on energy, a chapter on small, simple steps. And then I added a chapter on habits and flow. Because the ultimate state, and you've had Stephen Kotler and all these amazing people on here talking about flow state, is when you're in the zone. Where you lose flow states is you lose your sense of self, you lose it's effortless,
time,
and you lose your sense of time, and there's no motivation required because you're just in the zone. You know that as an athlete, when you're in the zone or you're on stage and it's just coming through you, right? We all have those moments. So we debunk and apply this method for a whole chapter on flow. And then finally, you could have the mindset and motivation and still be stuck in that box. Because again, let's say you believe everything is possible, and that's your mindset, and you're capable, and you deserve it, and you're motivated, but if you don't have the last M, which are the methods, then you're stuck in that box.
Okay.
You could believe that you deserve this income, you could be
hard
motivation, but if you're doing the wrong things, then you're not gonna get the result. If you're doing the wrong marketing tactics, or if you're doing the wrong things in a relationship, right? If you're using bad advice. And in here, I document the example of learning, because we learned very poor, antiquated methods of learning in school. It was rote repetition. To learn something, repeat it 100 times in your mind. And the problem is it just takes a lot of time. And it's not the optimal way the brain learns. The human brain doesn't learn through consumption, it learns through creation, right? The human brain does not learn by consuming, it learns by creating. And so we also learned a bad habit, a method of reading, which was sub-vocalization. Sub-vocalization is, have you ever noticed when you're reading something, you hear that inner voice inside your head reading along with you?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's your own voice, it's not like somebody else's voice. The reason why it keeps you reading slow is if you have to say all the words in this book, you can only read as fast as you could speak. That means your reading speed is limited to your talking speed,
So how do you,
not your thinking speed.
how do you limit the conversation in your mind?
It's interesting, right? Because the question becomes, everybody reads about 200, 250 words per minute because that's how the average person talks.
Speaks, wow.
But do you have to say, the question becomes, analyze it, common sense. Do you need to say all the words in order to understand what those words mean?
No.
The truth is no. Like when you see a stop sign, you don't say to yourself, stop, but do you comprehend what that means? Of
course. It's a
95,
symbol.
exactly. And just like symbols in the book, periods, punctuation marks, you don't say question mark when you read or comma when you read. You know, so the and there, because of all those are sight words, and you don't have to pronounce them by sound, you do them by sight. And the fastest readers actually only subvocalize the more difficult words. And so I'm not saying you
Really?
I know
So you just kind of skip through and just go through.
you read all the words. No, you read all the words, but you don't have to say all the words. And so that subvocalization is my example of an old method, an antiquated method that will keep you in that box of learning slow.
So let me do an example. Here's a sentence from your book, on part 2, about mindset.
Yeah.
And if I were to read this, I would read it slowly, just because that's how I'm used to it. I would say, and I already get nervous reading out loud from my childhood fears of
You're not
stumbling.
alone. You're not
The deeply
alone.
held beliefs, attitudes, and assumptions we create about who we are, how the world works, what we are capable of and deserve, and what is possible.
Yeah.
Mindset.
So let me show you how to actually. So one example, and there's a link in my Instagram for a free masterclass on reading, like a whole 1 hour tutorial in real time. Here, when people are reading, what I recommend is subvocalization. The key here is first acknowledge that it's there and don't try to fight it. Don't try to not subvocalize, because if you know this from your study of the mind, you can't not do anything. You can't not think of a purple giraffe because you have to do it.
Yeah.
So the more you try not to say the words, the more you're going to do it. Plus, you're going to be talking to yourself. Am I really understanding this? And you're not going to understand it because you have two things
You won't
going
get
on
in the
at once.
flow, yeah.
Right, exactly. And so the goal here is when you read past a certain speed, 400, there's a subvocalization threshold where you can't possibly talk any faster than that.
Right.
But you can understand it. Oh, perfect example. When you listen to your podcasts or audiobooks,
Like
many
double
people
speed or
exactly
1.5,
exactly,
yeah.
and you can understand it, but you can't speak that fast.
Right.
So that's proof you could think that fast
Sure.
but not understand it. And so here, one of the hacks that we teach in the book is to use a visual pacer. Like when you use your finger while you read, most people think this is an old antiquated method. They say don't do that because that will slow you down. But in actuality, I challenge everybody to take that master class on that link. And what you'll find is test yourself. Read without your finger and then read for another minute with your finger, count the number of lines. Just underlining it, that second time will be
go
25,
faster,
50% faster.
And just kind of forcing your finger to go a little faster than you would normally?
You could
or-
actually go regular because what happens is you don't regress. A lot of people have another bad method going back to limited methods, and we want to unlimit their methods of regressing and backskipping. You know, have you ever found yourself rereading words or
All the time.
rereading sentences? 25% of our time could be wasted doing that, and that's a bad habit that we learned when we were kids.
Why do
In
we do
fact,
that? Why do we repeat a sentence or a word?
The same reason why we self-vocalize, because we were taught that. Remember back in school, we were taught, so public speaking, when we got in those circles and we had to pass around that book, and that book comes closer and closer and closer.
The fear and anxiety
It just
of,
comes up,
they're
right?
calling my name. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where I believe we learned that public speaking was something to be
Scary.
feared.
Yeah.
And that's where it was imprinted on us. And for some people. And it was good intention, but people can be sincere, teachers, but be sincerely wrong. And I got that. I couldn't even read at that time. So when that book came to me, I would just look at it and it would look like hieroglyphics.
Pass. Yeah.
Exactly. And I would do that. And I would like cry. Like
Yeah.
it would be so embarrassing because everyone's looking at you and you have to perform. And that's where I think my fear of public speaking, why I wouldn't do the book report or speak on it and everything came from. But the other thing teachers had you do is once they know you could pronounce, and you had to say it out loud to make sure the teacher knows you're pronouncing it phonetically, right? But later on, your teacher taught you the limit with subvocalization because he or she said, all right, read quietly to yourself or read silently to yourself. And that's where you took that external voice and you're like, in order to understand it, I have to hear it. If not outside, then inside. And it's been there ever since. So this book is about unlimiting those bad habits of learning, of rote memorization, of bad habits we make about decisions. Like, why are people dating the same people or making the same financial mistakes and everything else? It's not insanity doing the same thing over and over again. It's a bad memory. And we weren't taught decision making. So like in the book, I talk about 4 supervillains that hold us back. And it's
What are
really because I
those?
talk about superpowers.
Yep.
4 supervillains, and I'll go back to the model and make this very like aha to everybody. 4 supervillains that are holding you and your team back, your children back, your team back, your employees back, your spouse back. Number 1, and they're all driven by technology, digital deluge. Digital deluge is this information overwhelm. It's like, do you feel nowadays like you can't keep up? It's like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, people buy a book, but they don't read the book. Right? It just sits on their shelf.
That's me.
It becomes shelf help, not self-help, right? And here's the thing.
That's good.
Buying a book is a different skill set than reading the book.
I'm really good at buying books.
Yes,
I'm
people
not that
are- some
good at
people are
reading the
excellent
book. I
at this,
can
right?
buy books all day long.
Exactly, but reading is a different skill set. But digital deluge is a real medical condition. They call it information fatigue syndrome. Higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness. And this is happening if you own a business or you have managed a team, that 4 or 5 hours a day on estimate are we spending processing information. Just think about your team, how much they have to process.
A lot.
Right? That means half of their salary is being paid to process and learn and read. So if someone's being paid $80,000, $40,000 is just to read something.
Oh my gosh.
So if I could double their reading speed, that's a huge amount of time. Like if it normally takes 4 hours to read something and you read it in half the time, 2 hours, what's 2 hours of the course of a year? That's like on math. And we can't even do the math because that's another one of the digital
Exactly.
challenges.
Okay.
But that's even if you save 1 hour a day, 365 hours a year.
Right.
40-hour work weeks. How many 40-hour work weeks? 9. 2 months of productivity we get back just saving 1 hour a day on something ubiquitous like reading. That's why this book will help you read every other book
Okay.
and save you time.
That's
so
amazing.
digital
Digital-
deluge.
yep.
Number 2, digital distraction. With every ring and ping and ding, every app notification, social media alert, it's training our distraction muscles. And we are so good at being distracted. That's why so much of my morning routine that people do, like something simple like brushing your teeth with the opposite hand, right? Because it engages the opposite side of your brain, which is good for making new connections, neuroplasticity, but it's also good for making you present.
You have to focus.
Right, it forces you to be in the moment. So it's something you do every day, that little things where you add novelty, where it focuses you to be here as opposed to about everything else, right? And how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you wake up first thing in the morning and touch your phone, I think you should have a to-do list. I think your not to-do list,
Don't touch your phone.
yeah, don't touch your phone first hour a
Yeah.
day. It rewires your brain to be distracted, and also it rewires your brain to be reactive. I can't stress this enough. When you pick up your phone the first hour of the day, and a lot of people talk about this, and we have videos. My video with Simon Sinek has 28 million views on just this thing on Facebook. It literally just says, don't touch your phone because it rewires your brain to be distracted and reactive because you're fighting fires. You're on the defense. Like, why are you going to check your email and voicemail and it takes you off tangent and you're not even focusing on what's most important, like in terms of your win? Our friend Brendan Burchard says this exactly. And you're like, you have a lot of quotes that you remember, but he says, your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life.
Boom.
Wow, Brendan Burchard. Your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life. So don't go on the defense. So don't pick up your
Yes.
phone, because when you wake up, you're in this relaxed state of awareness. You're very suggestible. So it's training your distraction and your reaction. You have to be proactive. You want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to the environment, a thermometer sets the environment. So digital distraction second. Third supervillain that's driven by technology, that's potentially holding you back, digital dementia. Digital dementia is where our phones become an external storage device. It keeps our to-dos, right? It keeps our phone. How many phone numbers did you know growing
Still a
up?
lot growing up, yeah.
Yeah, how many do you know now?
One.
Like, is there one person?
My own.
Is there somebody
Two,
you
maybe.
text and call all the
I
time?
know my mom's because I've had to like write it down as
Exactly.
like emergency contact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you don't have your phone with you, or the phone is battery's dead, you can't. Now here's the thing. Nobody wants to memorize 200 phone numbers.
No.
I don't want to do that. But isn't it concerning that we've lost the ability to remember one, or a passcode, or a conversation we just had? I believe 2 of the most costly
Or a
words in
name.
life. Yeah, in life or business, I forgot. Every time you say the words "I forgot," you lose credibility, you lose trust, you don't show you care about the person, you lose a sale. I can't tell you how many clients come to me saying, "Look, I forgot, I called this person by the wrong name, and he was so offended that he didn't do the deal with me. I lost $1 million commission." Like those kind of things, right? And how are you going to show somebody you're going to care for their future, their finances, their health, their family, if you don't care enough just to remember their name? Right, so we do 13, 14 tips on just how to remember people's names. We covered it in the previous episode also as well.
Okay.
So digital dementia is where it's a real source. I mean, Dr. Daniel Amen has talked about it. Other people have talked about, don't be over-reliant on technology to do everything. Memory is a muscle, and it's use it or lose it. That's why I'm such an advocate for mental fitness. I remember I walked into the office one day, I picked up the phone first thing in the morning, and a woman's voice was like, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I'm like, "Whoa, who's this?" She was like, "I found it." She went through our online memory course, and she was given a family heirloom, a necklace by her grandmother. It didn't go to her mother or her 3 sisters. It went to her, and she hid it somewhere in her house. She forgot. And she thought for 3 years, she thought it was stolen. She felt so much guilt, and she got so much shame from like her family, and she just passed on for generations. And after going through this course, and she woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning, ran down 2 flights of stairs, went behind the boiler in her basement, pulls out this crevice, the necklace.
Wow.
And I was like, "I didn't teach you a method on how to find lost items in this program." She was like, "I don't know what it is, but my focus, I'm just remembering this without even using a method. It's just," she was like, "Thank you for giving me my brain back." Because she felt like her brain was 20 years younger, because it was fit. And that's what I'm talking about. Mental intelligence is very important. Yeah, facts, figures, foreign languages, you learn how to do that in the methods of the book. Mental fitness and mental health, that's also very important.
Yeah.
Where if you're physically fit, right? So if you're going to go up Runyon Canyon or wherever, if somebody is not physically fit, they're going to have to use more effort, more energy, because they're not trained. And so if you're an athlete, you could help them as a coach in 2 ways. You could show them the strategies, like how to do a forehand or a backhand or hit a golf ball, and you can take them into the gym and optimize their fitness, their heart rate variability, their foods and everything.
Yeah.
So get people mentally fit, digital dementia. And finally, the last one that we talk about in the book, digital deduction. Right? I always iterate DDD. So digital deduction is where our phones and our smart devices are doing the thinking for us, because because it's just spoon feeding you. And I'm not just talking about fake news. I'm talking about algorithms that just give you everything, but you don't have to think anymore. And we've lost our thinking abilities to the point where you look at a menu and you're like, "I don't even know what to eat," because normally an app tells me what to eat or what to watch next or what to do everything. They're seeing kids, they have lower ability to critical thinking abilities, analysis ability, reasoning ability, because of phones, because our smart devices are making us stupid. And so in the book, to overcome these 4 digital supervillains, we teach for digital deluge, speed reading, and study, like how to study anything. Whether you're a student or not, students absolutely, technical material will help you overcome digital deluge. Digital distraction, we have to do a whole chapter on focus and concentration, literally how to functionally improve focus. Digital dementia, the biggest chapter in the book is memory training, like how to learn languages, how to remember names. And then finally, digital deduction, we do a whole chapter on how to think clearly, how to make good decisions, how to really solve problems, step by step, how to solve problems, how to make good decisions. Because as we talked about, your life is the C between the B and the D. How do you make those choices? Who taught you how to make choices, right? Like, and how to see it from different angles.
Right.
And so we teach that to alleviate those, so you can not only catch up, but you could actually get ahead. And that's really the goal.
How much does the body control the mind and the mind control the body? Are they very connected, or is the mind in complete control?
That's a great question. The short answer is the body has a huge and profound influence on our mind. And the reason is that we often talk about the brain, and we think the brain. The brain is important, but the brain and the spinal cord, which makes up what we call the central nervous system, are extensively connected with the body, and the body is extensively connected with the brain and spinal cord.
So the spinal cord is connected to the brain.
That's right.
The back. It comes up the neck.
That's right.
And the actual nerves are connected inside of your brain.
That's
and
right.
Go all the way down to lower back? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically we are a big tube, or our nervous system is a big tube. So your brain obviously is the thing that's shaped like more or less like this, and then the spinal cord extends off the back, and all that is housed in skull, except for two pieces of the brain, which are the eyes, which are actually two pieces of the brain that are outside the skull.
The eyes are a part of the brain.
They are absolutely a part of the brain. They are central nervous system. So it's eyes, brain, and spinal cord.
They're all connected.
They're all connected.
So if you took that out of the body, let's say, they would all be connected in some way.
They're contiguous, as we say. They're just one unit.
They're one piece.
That's right. And when sometimes they get challenged, people say the eyes aren't part of the brain. And well, then that means that the spinal cord is part of the brain too. And I want to be really clear. This is not semantics. There is a genetic program that ensures that early in development, during the first trimester, when we were all in our mother's bellies, the retinas, the neural retinas and eyes were deliberately pushed out of the skull. And the reason you have those eyes outside your skull is so that you can evaluate things at a great distance from you, right? Because otherwise everything would have to be in contact with you. Other animals do this mainly using smell. We are very visually driven. So a lot of our genome is devoted to vision and understanding what's going on at a distance from us. And that's afforded us a huge evolutionary advantage.
To survive.
To survive, because the more that I can anticipate events at a distance, the more that I can coordinate with my environment, like daytime and nighttime, but also when objects are coming at me, or things I want to chase and kill, or you think about mating behavior and hunter-gatherer behavior, all of that, evaluating faces and facial expressions without actually having to come into contact with people, afford a huge evolutionary advantage. But I want to make sure that I answer your question thoroughly. The nervous system includes the brain, which we now know includes the eyes as well, the spinal cord, and then what's called the peripheral nervous system, all the connections with the body. And every organ in our body, our heart, our diaphragm, our lungs, our spleen, our liver, all of it is as we say, innervated. It receives
connected
nerve connections.
To the brain?
That's right, from the brain and spinal cord. So much so that if we were to just dissolve away everything except the nervous system, if we had a human nervous system splayed out here on the table in front of us, it would look like a human being. There would be a connection at every level down to, you'd be able to say that's the big toe, and that's the pinky, and that's where the heart would belong, because it's almost like a silhouette of our entire body. And so when we think about the nervous system, it's really important, I think, for people to understand that the nervous system is all of that, brain and body, and all the connections back and forth. And there have been thousands of years of debates about what's the mind, what's the brain, et cetera, the mind-body problem, all that. I think it's fair to say in 2020 that states of mind include the brain, the activity of the brain, and the body. Those two things coordinate, the brain and the body, and have a sort of what I call a contract. There's a brain-body contract that gives rise to things like states of mind. So a feeling of depression or a feeling of awe or excitement or happiness.
Which is a state of mind is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, we could talk about why.
An emotional experience is a state of mind?
That's right.
Yeah.
I prefer to talk about states and states of mind because they include the brain and body. So just by saying mind, I don't mean just brain. They include the brain and body. And also because...
So when you say, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
brain and body mean thought and feeling?
Yeah, so you're asking the key questions. Emotions are very hard to describe in an objective way, whereas states have certain properties that allow us to study them in different laboratories and from one experiment to the next. So some people may have heard this before, but the brain does really 5 things. We have sensation, which is, we're constantly being bombarded with sound waves and light and smells and things. And that stuff is ongoing and you can't negotiate that. It's just you have these receptors in your body that allow you to evaluate those things. A sea turtle has magnetoreception. It can navigate by magnetic fields. Wow. We cannot do that. But they can because they sense it. Infrared vision in a pit viper or something. So unless you put on, night vision goggles, you can't do that. Then there's perception, which is which sensations you are paying attention to. So as you write with your pen, if I say, what does that pen feel like in your hand? Now you're perceiving it. But the sensation was always there. Those receptors were always sensing it.
So the sensation being the actual feeling, or the actual visual, the perception is your interpretation of the feeling?
So I would say that the perceptions are where your attention is, which sensations you're attending to. And then you have thoughts, and thoughts get a little complicated for us to parse because they are a little bit abstract. But thoughts are a combination of our perception, whatever it is we're attending to, and they have context, memory. they're tapped into our memory systems, right? Because if I say a pen and you're like, I don't know what your relationship to pens is, but mine is kind of a trivial one. I write with one. But let's say I come from a family that, I don't know, had a pen factory in Germany in the 1930s. Then there's a whole...
Or you got stabbed by a pen
Or you got
when you were a
stabbed by a
kid.
pen, right. So it's very contextual.
Yeah.
So thoughts are like perceptions, but they carry memory and context.
Thoughts are memory and context.
Yeah, they include that. And then there are feelings/emotions. And this is where it really starts to get abstract and kind of hazy, and where there's still a lot of debate. Because, for instance, if I ask you how you're feeling and you say, most people say, I feel good. Well, what does that mean? I mean, that's not a feeling. So if you ever do personal development work, they're always like, don't say good or bad. What do you feel? And people will say, well, I feel calm and excited or something like, and it starts becoming very abstract. And so emotions are a real thing, and they certainly, perhaps more than anything else, recruit the brain and the body. When we feel depressed, we occupy certain postures, we feel it in our gut, we feel it in our limbs, we can feel fatigue, we can feel anxious, and so the emotions are really where you capture that mind, the brain-body contract and relationship very, very intensely.
Okay.
And then the fifth thing is actions. And what I love about actions and behaviors is they are very concrete. You're writing with your pen now, I'm speaking, I'm moving my hands. You can measure those things, you can analyze them, we know exactly what the neural pathways are. So we've got sensation, perception, emotions, and actions.
Thoughts, yep.
And then, of course, beneath all that, you've got memories, and people always like to raise intuition. They always say, what about that sixth thing, intuition? And we could talk about intuition, but the reason I like to talk about states and the reason we study states in my lab is that states have two properties that are easy to study somewhat compared to emotions. And that's how pervasive they are, meaning how long-lasting they are. States tend to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whereas emotions, it's sort of like they're more in combination. States are more like the primary colors from which you mix you get all the emotions.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that they have an intensity that we can measure. You can have a state of being very alert or very drowsy or asleep.
And you can say from a 1 to 10, how are you feeling in this state?
That's right. And we can
How
measure
much is that
it.
experience?
That's right. And we can correlate it with things like heart rate variability, breathing speed, sweating, levels of neural activity in brain areas that control wakefulness. And so I will be the first to say that I would love to be able to say that in my laboratory we are studying, or someday we'll study, awe and flow and all those things. But those are higher up on the ladder than we can get to right now. I think with the current technology, we can understand states, and from there, I do believe that we can make a significant dent into certain mental health issues and optimize performance in certain communities that are trying to optimize performance and in the general public. But the states that we're focused on are very concrete. For instance, alert and focused. That would be a wonderful state to understand and be able to direct ourselves toward when we're not feeling alert and focused.
How to get into that
How
state.
to get into that state. And we could talk about tools for that if you like. Sleep. Sleep is so powerful and so important. I think now people really understand the extent to which it's important, in large part because of Matt Walker's book, Why We Sleep, and the important work that he's done in his lab at Berkeley and many other labs as well, of course. So focus, sleep, creativity, stress. These are the kind of core states that we would like to tackle first because we believe we can. And then hopefully in my career, but if not in my career, then maybe one of my scientific offspring or another laboratory, 10, 20, 100 years from now, we'll be able to understand things like how does one get into a state of empathy? I mean, we could spend the whole hour talking about empathy, but it's hard, and it's a fascinating topic, and it's so important, but it's just very hard to understand at a neural level. So we're starting with the basics, with the confidence that by understanding those basics, they will build up to richer representations and understanding of things like empathy someday.
Yeah. Would you need to be studying the heart as well to understand empathy, or does it all come from the mind?
It's a great question. So to understand any state, we believe that you have to study the brain and the spinal cord and the body. Wow. So in my lab, we talk about being neuroscientists. For me, that means we study the nervous system, the whole thing. So people who come into my laboratory, we put them into VR environments that simulate some experience. And I realize it's not as real as being in the actual experience in the real world, but you get enough presence, especially because it's very visually and auditorily rich in those environments. People get what's called presence. They forget that they're in a VR environment. at least for moments. And in that time, we're measuring heart rate variability, we're measuring sweating, we're measuring, in many cases, we also have electrodes lowered into their brain because we do this with neurosurgery patients. And so we have access to the brain, we have access to the body. And it's really by recording from all these areas of the brain and body that we can get a fuller understanding of what a state of, say, focus or stress or anxiety really is. If we were just looking in one little corner of the brain or just at the heart, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so that's a kind of a centerpiece of our lab, is that brain and body, the whole nervous system is the key. You got to look at all of it.
Just 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day with 120 people, trading resentment, frustration, fear for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness. Measuring their immune response, the chemical immunoglobulin A, your primary defense against bacteria and viruses, the best flu shot you'll ever get, lives innately within you. Turns out when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, when you're fearful, the immune system dials down because you're in emergency. It's all your energy is going for some threat in your outer world. There's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. But how do you turn that around? So then, as people begin to open their heart, can that chemical begin to elevate? 4 days, 50% change in the 120 people. Their IgA levels went up 50% in 4 days. Wow. That's your body's immune system is now upregulating genes that are making proteins and immunoglobulins and antibodies that you don't need a flu shot. In other words, your inner state is greater than your outer world. So then, just by doing that, we now know that your immune system is going to get stronger. By the same means, take 120 people or 50 people and measure 7,500 gene regulations. Okay? In 4 days, 2 genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors are activated and upregulated. The genes that stimulate stem cells to go to damaged tissues and repair them, upregulated. The gene for oxidative balance is upregulated. Anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. Just your body's naturally doing this. The gene for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning. This is 4 days. The gene switches on. The gene for more balance in the pituitary and the pancreas. The gene for the microtubules of the cells, the little fibers that respond to energy and frequency. So in 4 days, we now know that you can change your genetic destiny if you just practice the inner work. We have research to show that 60 days of meditation, 5 days a week, will lengthen your life. The telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of your DNA, get longer. That means your biological age is changing. So we have the evidence now to show people what's possible. We have brain scans that are so outside of normal that when neuroscientists see them, they're blown away, because the amount of energy that's in the brain during this transcendental moment is hundreds of times outside of normal.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make your brain do that. Something is happening to you, and that person's having a transcendental moment. And we now know that we can predict it, and we now know that we can induce it. So then there's the evidence there. Then you take our community and you see people with stage 4 cancer, with Parkinson's disease, with myasthenia gravis, with lupus, with MS, with brain injuries, with rare genetic disorders, with vertigo, tinnitus, kidney failure, all kinds of health conditions, come to a week-long event, and then at the end of that event, they make significant strides in getting beyond the emotions of the past. Now think about this. The science says that the environment signals the gene. That's epigenetics. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So as long as you're living by the same emotion every single day, you're signaling the same gene in the same way. And if that gene is related to a survival emotion, a stress hormone, then you're downregulating the gene and you're creating disease. So when the person trades that emotion and really breaks free from the chains of their past, and now they're feeling an elevated emotion, well, now they're dialing down the gene for MS, and they're upregulating the gene for health and balance. And so the person, you'll say to them, where's the disease? Well, I'm not the same person. I'm not the, and the side effect of that is a transformation and healing. So the funny thing about it is the person who has the healing is not talking about the healing. Whether it's blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, we have crazy evidence now. What they're talking about is how amazing they feel because they're refreshed. They got a new lease on life.
Yeah.
And so now we have evidence in our research, and that silences the critic to show that what's possible for people. And now we have evidence and testimony, that we have evidence where people will stand on the stage and say, hey, I broke my back in 3 places. I haven't been able to stand up straight. I came into this event hunched over. I couldn't lay down. And now this guy's jumping around on the stage. He's laying on his back. He's touching his toes. He's you can tell. I mean, he's having his moment. We changed somebody.
Yeah.
Someone with Parkinson's disease can't swallow, can't chew, can't blow her nose, can't stand up. One moment, the next thing you know, she's blowing her nose, chewing, swallowing. We changed her body, we changed her life, and we changed her future. And she doesn't look like a movie star, and she doesn't look like she's a vegetarian, and she doesn't look like she's buffed. She just looks like a normal person. Now, the person in the audience who's watching that and looking at this person and seeing that they're no different than them, it just starts to cause them to think, if someone else can do it, I can do it. So you see the person with the stage 4 cancer that got the voodoo curse that they have 3 months to live. And now they have no evidence of cancer in their body, and they're standing on the stage telling that story, and somebody in the audience is checking her out going, I have the same condition, and if she can do it, I'm going to step right in that footprint. I'm going to do it the way she did it. And all of a sudden, you start seeing this change in the community in a week-long event, because once there's a breakthrough, right? I mean, it's like a 4-minute mile. It's in the field, you know? But it's not only in the field. You're seeing evidence in 3-dimensional reality, and evidence is the loudest voice right now. And so people don't want to see talking heads. Anybody can see it. On the internet, information is readily available. What they want to see is evidence. And so when you have evidence in the scientific realm, and then you have evidence in a community of people, and you're not doing anything that's so extreme that excludes anybody. It's inclusive, and we're using science as the contemporary language of mysticism. It is science that's going to demystify the mystical. If I talk tradition, culture, religion, any of those things, spiritual principles, people are going to shut off. You're going to divide an audience. But science creates community.
Right.
So by building a scientific model, I don't subscribe to any type of meditation, because I look at the evidence of what we've gathered in, let's see, by applying this formula, to what extent can we prove to human beings how powerful they really are? And I think that has become something that has mystified me, because when I see blind people seeing in our workshops, I have to tell you that I'm more surprised than anybody. I'm standing up there shaking my head, and we have great evidence. One woman was, she's a nurse, and one day she just wakes up and she's got a blind spot in her eye. She can't see in the lower left-hand quadrant of both eyes, 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
Wow.
She's a nurse. She goes to see her colleagues. They do a scan, stroke on the optic nerve.
Wow.
And now she's legally blind. She can't drive her car. She runs her own company. She can't run her company. She can't type. She can't use the computer. She's compromised in a big way. Now, with a stroke, you have 2 weeks, really. That's the window. And if nerve cells are going to come back online, it's going to be those first 2 weeks.
Wow.
If they don't come back, the prognosis is live with it. Whether you have paralysis or whatever, that if a stroke causes brain damage in usually 2 to 3 weeks, you don't see much change. So they gave her the prognosis. You have to learn to accommodate and live with it. And so she wasn't satisfied with that answer, and she goes to one of her dear friends who's a physician, and the physician says, go check out the Dispenza guy. And she says, why don't you come with me? So they come to our event in Brighton in the UK
Was
together.
this within the 2 weeks, or was this later? Do you know?
Oh no, this is a year later.
Wow.
This is a year later. And
So it's supposed to be irreversible at that point.
And so she comes to the event, and she comes to the event for two reasons. To listen to this, to learn how to live with her handicap. That's the extent of what's possible
And have
in her
more
mind.
peace and
Yeah. And then create a nonprofit to help people. Those were her two things. So somewhere in the middle of the event, it occurs to her that she could actually possibly heal her eyes. So she goes for it. She lays down after one of the meditations we lay down at the end, and all of a sudden, like in her head, she starts feeling this heat and this crackling sensation. Now, you have one of two options when something like this happens.
You get scared.
You
and
get
run
scared,
away.
it's the unknown, you contract, and your brain goes into high beta, and you disconnect.
Something's wrong. I'm hurting something.
Yeah, I'm having another stroke, whatever. Or you surrender and relax into it.
Yeah, you go in. Yeah.
And she let go, and she had the most incredible experience. She laid there for the longest time, opened her eyes, and she said it was like the lights came back on. She said, I could see completely. We sent her for a scan. The Monday morning after that week-long event, the scan that had the left lower quadrant on both eyes from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock was black. The post-scan, there isn't one black spot anywhere on her eyes.
Because she'd already done a scan a year prior.
Yeah. She had the scan. So
Wow.
we'll give you the evidence, but that is not natural.
Wow.
That's not normal. But how do you explain that in conventional science? I mean, the truth is that we have incredibly powerful innate qualities for regeneration and healing once you hit that button. So then she stands in the audience and gives her testimony. Other people are going to begin to realize that they can heal from a stroke, and that's exactly what's happening. A collective consciousness is happening.
What is the moment of transformation for someone like that? Like, when does someone, because I know that healing can happen in an instant. So what's the thing that triggers that instant for someone to go from disbelief to belief, and it actually transforming them in the physical body?
Yeah, we've studied this, and there's no linear correlation, because think about this. That woman is a pragmatist. She knew nothing. She wasn't spiritual in any way. She just read my books and then started practicing the meditations. Now, she was practicing those meditations for months before the event because she wanted to come and be fully prepared for it, right? So from the outside, you see this one moment.
Yep.
But what you don't see is the number of times she worked in overcoming herself and getting beyond whoever she is and getting into that place where she's far enough outside familiar territory, neurologically, chemically, genetically, that all of a sudden she connects to
clicks.
this. She connects. She starts connecting to that invisible field called the quantum field, and you can't connect as your body. There's nothing physical to connect to there. You have to get beyond all your associations.
You know, it's interesting. I think I might have talked to you about this last time. That I grew up in a religion called Christian Science that talked a lot about this. You know, it was embedded in my mind that I'm a spiritual being and that I can never be physically hurt. Like, I'm not a material body, that there are no accidents, that there's no injury. And it was always embedded in my mind that I can never be physically harmed, or I can be instantly healed. And so my entire childhood, I had all these incredible healings quickly. And I witnessed it all the time from other people, and everyone was always like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is something I was practicing, you know, in a different way as a child, but it's always fun for me to come back around now. Even though I don't practice that religion necessarily anymore or go to the church, I still believe the same fundamental principles that I hear you talking about in a more scientific way.
It's a good belief to have.
Yeah.
And you program children you program your children that the body has an innate capacity to heal.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're less reliant on something outside of you to make something go away inside of you.
Medicine or something else.
Whatever it is, shopping, video gaming, everybody's relying on their outer relationship to change their inner state. Problem is the moment you start feeling emptiness or lack, your brain is going to start to look for something outside of you to take it away. The problem
To fill the hole, yeah.
Right. The problem is that normally the stimulation that's created from those outer things give the body a rush, and so the receptor sites in the cells recalibrate. So you need more the next time to turn it on, right? So now
It's tough. You buy the new fancy car, and it's fun for
the novelty
a month,
wears off,
and
right?
then it's a
Yeah.
week, and then
Yeah.
it's a day, and you're
Yeah.
like, it's never enough.
and that feeling never goes away. And so the only way that feeling is actually going to go away is when you start going inward, right? And so we've seen significant changes with people, and having that belief, it should be tested. We should test our belief around that. And my lesson through all of this is that I'm starting to realize how conditioned we are into believing how limited we are. And as you start peeling those layers away and you break through those beliefs, those self-limiting thoughts and emotions, on the other side of that is where the miraculous happens. So you got to be willing to be in that place of discomfort long enough to reorganize order and begin to create more coherence. And then all of a sudden, you get this recalibration that goes on in the brain and body. And then the extent of that is that the ultimate thing is you start to see feedback in your life, those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities. You're scratching your head going,
Everything's falling into place.
hey, I'm in the right place at the
Everything
right
I
time.
think about just comes to me.
Because your energy is synchronized. Look, I mean, when you have coherence in the brain and heart, you have a laser of energy, and it could read information much better. You're living in stress, and your brain is shifting its attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place to go. Each one of those things, there's an assignment of neurological networks in the brain. So the arousal of the stress hormones drives the brain into this high frequency, and you're trying to control and predict everything in your life. And your brain circuits are firing like a lightning storm in the clouds. When your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent, and you don't have a signal. You don't have a Wi-Fi signal. You're not connected to the field. How could you connect to energy and information if your signal hasn't become orderly? So that when people synchronize their energy into coherence, they can synchronize to a possibility in the future. And the synchronicities that are feedback from the environment are just a reflection of your energy. And that's the universe saying, follow the breadcrumbs, do it again, follow it again, do it again. And now all of a sudden the person's not waking up in the morning like, oh, I gotta meditate now to create my future. They're kind of going like, I'm getting out of bed because I don't want the magic to end, right? They want to sustain that state so that the old reality that they've lived in begins to transform into something new, and because there's no longer a vibrational match with everyone and everything in their past, present reality, there's a vibrational match to their future, and now their future is starting to give them signals.
There was a model that you give that I think we should start with.
Yeah.
There's a method that you give, or a model for how to become limitless. And if we don't follow this model, then something's going to be broken in our life. Isn't that right?
Yeah, this model really is a framework for learning anything faster. So for people who are listening and watching and they want to learn a language, they want to learn Mandarin, music, martial arts, management, marketing, math,
Any
anything.
skill.
I think if there's one skill to master in the 21st century, it's our ability to learn faster. Like if there was a genie and a genie could grant you any one wish, but only one wish, what would you wish for? If it was only one wish, what would you wish for?
Most people would say money or this or that, but you think learning is the key?
I mean, I think a lot of people
I think
go
being
for,
the Matrix, like downloading the Matrix,
Yeah.
it's where I could learn jujitsu in a second.
Exactly.
If I can learn a language in a
Yeah,
second. If I can
like-
have this skill.
So I think the hack a lot of people would do is if it was any one wish, they would wish for more wishes, right? They would ask for
exactly.
infinite wishes. So the equivalent, if I was your learning genie and I could grant you any one wish to learn any subject or any skill, just like become a master at it, what's the equivalent of the answer of asking for infinite wishes? It would be learning how to learn. Because if you can learn how to learn, the world is yours, especially today, because nobody who's listening and watching gets paid for their brute strength. It's their brain strength. It's not your muscle power, it's completely your mind power. And the challenge is your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual. It's not user-friendly, and that's the reason why I wrote this book. But the limitless model is an explanatory schema, a framework for learning anything faster. And not only that, but really for accessing our human potential. Because I think if there's one infinite, limitless resource on planet Earth, it's human capability. There's no limit on our determination. There's no limit to our imagination. There's no limit to our creativity. And yet we're not shown how to be able to access that. And so this framework is a 3-part framework. And what I would offer everyone to do is, I love to turn this into like a little master class, make it really engaging. And so don't listen passively, because we don't learn through, the human brain doesn't learn through consumption. It learns through creation and creativity and getting involved in things. And I know a lot of us learn faster when we actually roll up our sleeves and do it. So I would encourage everybody, as they're working out or cleaning the house or whatever they're doing at the same time, to try to get involved in this.
Well, I think as an athlete, I can speak to that, because for me in school, it's really hard to remember or learn things because I didn't feel like I was participating in a way that worked for me. But as an athlete playing basketball, when a coach would tell me, okay, I want you to watch this video and then automatically shoot in a certain way with your hand positioned this way and follow through this way, just by watching a video and not actually implementing and practicing it, he would take me out on the court and we would practice it and do it over and over again, and he would correct me, and I would learn through muscle memory as opposed to just watching something and then thinking I can do it without actually practicing.
Right.
So putting it into practice quickly for me is how I learned sports, and it's how I try to apply it in other areas of my life, as opposed to just, I'm going to learn and then, okay, I know it. I feel like I need to work in it.
I feel you.
Get dirty, you know what I mean?
I do. I think a lot of people, this is the thing, it's not how smart you are, it's not literally not how smart you are, it's how are you smart. It's not how smart you are, or how smart your kids are, or how smart your business partner is. It's how are they smart, or how are you smart.
What's the difference?
So you are smart through experiential learning. Like in the book, we talk about—
how are you smart? Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not how smart somebody is, like their IQ or their intelligence. It's how are they smart. And it's always context dependent. And so some people learn, we talk about learning styles in the book. It's like, have you ever been interested, just like you were saying, you're interested in a topic, but you're not getting it? Because sometimes the way you prefer to learn is different than the way the teacher prefers to teach. And it's like you're two ships in the night and you pass each other and you don't even realize there's no connection. You don't even realize the other one is there, and it feels uncomfortable. Like if I asked everybody as an exercise to take out a piece of paper, I encourage everyone to take notes, because I'm going to drop a lot of like practical methods. When you're taking, if you were to write your name first and last on a piece of paper, actually you can do it right now, first and last, and everyone encourages you to do this. Or imagine you're writing your name first and last on a piece of paper, and then when you're done, I want you to switch hands, and in your opposite hand, right below it, write your first and last name with your opposite
I don't even know if
hand.
it'd take me 10 minutes.
And so while people are doing it, you'll notice when you're doing it with the opposite hand, as we're doing it, that's actually pretty good. That if I was to ask you which one was easier, first or second, and you would say the first was easier. Which one is more comfortable, first or last?
The first one?
The first one. So not only was it faster, it was easier, and then which one was higher quality? Let's check that out. Hopefully the first one's higher quality also as well. And so here's the thing. That means the second time it took longer. The second time it also was not as comfortable. And the second time also the quality wasn't quite as good. Correct. And here's the thing, when I'm saying it's how you learn, some people are trying to learn something with the opposite hand. So it takes longer, it feels weird, and the quality is not quite as good as opposed to if you're using your dominant hand.
So how do we know how to learn with our dominant hand as opposed to the opposite hand?
Yeah, and that's a metaphor for how we like to take in information. Some people like to learn by reading. Some people, they just cannot get through a book, though. They have to listen to that audio or that podcast. Other people
or watch someone lecturing it or talking about it.
Exactly. And so we all have different styles, and it's not right or wrong. Now, we can actually improve our ability to read. We actually can improve our ability to listen and apply. So if there are areas where we feel weak, this book is a guidebook to be able to level up those areas so you can be more of a whole brain learner also as well. But really when it comes to accelerated learning, it's not, again, how smart you are, it's how are you smart. And that honors us and it takes the judgment out. Sometimes in school, it's like the top 10% get A's, another 10% get B's, and then 80% were like you and I. It's like we're failing school as opposed to the way school maybe is failing us, because school teaches you what to learn, what to focus on, what to think, what to remember, but not how to learn and how to think.
Well, it teaches you how to think and learn in one way. essentially, right?
Exactly. And when I talk about in the book, I talk about the four supervillains that are holding you back in your work, in your schooling, in your life is driven by technology. But one of them is digital deduction, where we're depending on technology to tell us what to think. We're not even using the children right now. They're finding that their reasoning abilities, their ability to analyze, critical thinking is not as sharp as where it should be because of technology, because technology is doing the thinking for us. And our mind, I'm going to say this repeatedly, is like a muscle. It's use it or lose it. And just like when you have your personal trainer to make your muscles stronger, more energized, more flexible, more pliable, you want your mental muscles to be stronger, more energized, more pliable, more flexible.
Of course.
And so many people refer to me as a brain coach, because what I do is I train your brain, because I think we're in the millennium of the mind. I mean, it's really about mental fitness, our ability to adapt, our ability to think, our ability to solve problems. And this really is everything. When people see me wearing brain shirts all the time or pointing to my brain, the reason why I do that is because what you see, you take care of. You see your hair, you take care of your hair. You see your skin, you take care of your skin. You see your clothing, you take care of your clothing.
You don't see your brain.
Exactly. And that controls everything. And so when I point to the brain or honor with their shirt, it's just like people have their emotions on their sleeve. I have my brain on my chest because I want to put it forefront to remind people to love their brain, to care for their brain.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people, doctors and nutritionists, are talking about gut health. It's like we can't see it, but we can start to feel rashes, or we can start to feel the effects of it. I think it's also heart health is a big thing right now. It's just like the emotional health, self-care, self-love, mental health and emotional health kind of tie together.
And I love your work because you bring that to everybody, to the world. And it's all connected. I talk about it in the book. There's this heart intelligence and also your gut, as you mentioned. A lot of people call it your second brain. It's the second highest concentration of nerve cells.
Really?
And so, and it's connected too. And sometimes what you eat affects how you think. We know that because of the guests we've had on our shows and everything else, that when you eat junk food, which is not, it's not really a thing. There's junk and then there's food.
There's sugar and there's food.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. I remember in our previous episode we did years ago, I showed people how to memorize the brain foods and all of the best neuroprotective, this area of neuronutrition. It's really fascinating that your brain has different nutritional requirements than the rest of your body. But going back to the limitless model, there are 3 keys to reaching your goals. And this is my distinction here, because originally, I remember years ago when you prompted me to write this book, you're like, Jim, it's been, over 2 decades.
You got to do something.
You put something in this book. And so because, fundamentally, I'm a reading teacher. And, if somebody has decades, why I love reading, if somebody has decades of experience and they put it into a book like you, and all of a sudden people could read that book in a few days, they could download decades into days. And readers are leaders. We know that. And reading is to your mind what exercises your body. It's the best mental fitness. And so the limitless model as an exercise, what I want everyone to do, so it's not hypothetical, because in part of the book I demystify the 7 lies of learning. There are 7 lies that hold you back to learning, and one of them is knowledge is power. We hear that all the time. I've even said it also as well. But when we think about it, is it really true? Right? Is knowledge, just knowing something, give you power? No, not unless you act on it, not unless you apply it. So knowledge times action equals power. And so I would encourage everybody as you're listening to this to take immediate action. And there are 3 questions I want you to ask as you're listening to this episode to make it very valuable. And I would encourage you to write these down. 3 master questions. We were talking about some of the famous actors that I work on before we started filming. And Will Smith did the cover endorsement of the book that says, Jim Quick, it gets the maximum out of me as a human being. I've learned so much from this man, just being around so many around clients.
Yeah.
And
what did you learn from Will?
So one of the things is this idea of, we were in Toronto, and I help actors speed read scripts, help them to memorize their lines faster. I mean, you imagine like 30 pages of scripts. There's a lot of information.
I can't remember a sentence.
There's a lot, right? And some of them have their strategies, and no matter how great somebody is, this because you make your life about studying and researching greatness. they always know there's another level,
Yes.
and they get really good at the fundamentals and the basics. But one of the things when we're there, we spent the day together, and it was winter time in Toronto. They were filming from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., which, can you imagine? Like,
So hard.
Like
Overnight.
at nighttime, that's very difficult. But during the day, we went through an exercise, and I believe, so in there I talk about how we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, right? And these thoughts are controlling our lives. And a lot of those thoughts are questions that we ask ourselves. You know, thinking is that process of asking and answering questions. And if people are asking, is that true? Notice you had to ask a question to define if it's true or not, right? And there's certain questions we ask more than any other question.
Like what?
So here's the thing. I talk about dominant questions, that you have 1, 2, 3 questions that you ask a lot of, and I want everyone to think about what your dominant questions are, including you. And I'll give you a couple of examples to get you started. So for example, one of my friends, we went through this exercise of meditating and writing, journaling down. We found out her dominant question is, how do I get people to like me? How do I get people to like me? Now, she asked that question all the time, and you don't know anything about her. You don't know her age, you don't know her background, you don't know what she does for a living, you don't know what she looks like, you don't know where she lives, you don't know anything about her, but you know a lot about her. If you asked yourself, how do I get people to like me, hundreds of times a day, what's her personality? What's her personality going to be like? What's her life going to yield?
Well, I guess it could be either side of the spectrum. She could be super outgoing and super adventurous to try to get people to be more attracted to her, or she could be super shy and introverted because she's so worried about what people think about her.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I thought of, but I'm not sure if that's true.
And it's absolutely true. She actually does both of those things.
Really?
I mean, if you ask yourself, how do I get people to like me? Then what are you doing? You're people pleasing all the
of
time.
course.
You're a sycophant.
Saying yes to everything.
Yeah. You people take advantage of you because you're martyring yourself because they're always trying to, they're making themselves less than, or their personality is never consistent because their personality changes.
The chameleon, they change for people.
Exactly. And you know all that about her, and you only know one question she asks herself, and that's one of her dominant questions. I would offer everybody who's listening to this, what do you think your dominant question is? Because questions are the answer. You know this from the work that you do in high performance and greatness, that the questions you ask determine what you focus on. You have part of your brain called the reticular activating system, RAS for short, and it's your filtering system. So at any given time, there's a billion stimuli that we could be paying attention to. And primarily, your brain is a deletion device. It's trying to keep information out. Otherwise, you would go crazy, right, if you paid attention to everything. So what gets in? So for example, years ago, my little sister started sending me emails and postcards and pictures and photograph of a very specific kind of dog. It was a pug dog. You know those
Cute
little
dogs.
exactly.
Men in Black dog, right?
Yes, exactly. Very smushy faces. They're very compliant. You could dress them up as ballerinas, and they don't care. And she starts, and I didn't know why. So my question was like, why is she sending me these pictures all the time? That became a dominant question of the day. And then I realized her birthday was coming up. So she's a smart marketer, right? Planting those seeds. And here's the magic, though. I started seeing pug dogs, Lou, everywhere. I would go to the grocery store, I'd be checking out, and I swear to you, a woman's carrying a pug dog at the register. I would be running and jogging in my neighborhood, and somebody's walking 6 pug dogs.
Wow.
Now, my question for everybody is, where did these pug dogs magically appear all of a sudden in the world? No, they were always there, but they were not, I wasn't paying attention to them because they weren't important because I wasn't asking that question. Once you ask a question, you start to pay attention to those things, and that focus determines how you feel, determines your behaviors, and primarily, it's so interesting, it's kind of like social media. There's an algorithm to your mind, like there's an algorithm to Facebook and Instagram, that what you engage with the most, you like and you share, you comment, you start seeing more of those kind of things, right? And so just like your mind, what you start engaging with, if you start watching all this news about fear and all the things that are going on, you start paying attention, and your mind just starts focusing automatically. It becomes a reaction, a reflex.
And you start to attract more of the fear and anxiety or worry that's in the world that's being posted.
Very much so.
You start to subscribe to whatever that is to receive more of it.
Exactly.
You're thinking about it.
So just like on social media, if you start just liking all the cat stuff and everything else, they'll just start feeding you cat stuff.
Right.
And same thing with negativity, and same thing with opportunity also as well. So the questions make a difference. So questions are the answer.
What are the 2 questions that are dominant in your mind over the last 5 years the most?
Yeah. So for learning, because I grew up with the broken brain, many people know my story from the last episode. When they see me do these demonstrations at Summit Series or events you and I have
Remembering 1,000 people's names in
right,
10 minutes. And
all of that
crazy
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I say that I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's possible. Because the truth is, we could all do that and a whole lot more.
Yeah.
We just weren't taught.
Yeah.
If anything, we're taught a lie that somehow our intelligence is fixed, like our shoe size. But I do it as a demonstration because I grew up with learning difficulties. Right, I had my brain injury when I was 5. I had a very bad fall when I was in kindergarten. Rushed to the hospital.
Wow.
Before I was curious and very energized, my parents would say, but then I became very shut down. And my superpower growing up was being invisible. It was shrinking because I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want to be called on. So I was literally physiologically, I was always trying to look smaller to protect myself so teachers wouldn't call on me or I wouldn't be bullied or something like that. And
I would do that as well, except for I was just a giant in the class. So
Right,
I didn't know how
right.
to do it. I was
So
always picked on.
So for me, I would actually be sitting behind you, and I would be guaranteed no one would be able
Exactly.
to see me. But going back to my question became all the time, first of all, when I was 9 years old, I was slowing the class down, and a teacher pointed to me and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain." And that label became my limit. And so we have, think about when you're listening to this, what are the labels that we put on ourselves? It's like we're not born. We're born with a blank slate, right? But through experience, through expectations of other people, through our environment, we learned that we are limited.
Yeah.
And the good news is we can unlearn it, and that's the point of the book. But because I was in the broken state, I would always ask myself, why am I broken? Why am I the stupid one? And I started getting answers of why I'm so stupid, right? Every time I did badly on a test, I would be like, oh, because I have the broken brain. Right? If I was in sports, I'd be like, oh, because I'm the broken one. And that became my self-talk. Adults have to be very careful with their external words because they become a child's internal words. But later I started to get so frustrated, I started getting curious. And when you're curious, you start to ask different questions. I was like, why is that person why are they so smart? And how come I'm studying 3 times harder and getting less grades than them, right? And I started getting answers. My dominant question ended up being like, how do I make this better? But the 3 questions that I focus on, and let me tell you first what Will's is. Will Smith's, one of his dominant questions when we went through this exercise is, how do I make this moment even more magical? How do I make this moment even more magical? It used to be, how do
every
I make
moment or like in acting
this
alone?
moment, any moment,
Wow.
like, and it shows up right in his life, because later that night when we're filming, it was like 2:00 in the morning, and his family, we're all outside for the superhero movie that many people know of, and it was really cold because it was in Toronto, and it was winter time, and we're all just waiting. And just waiting and waiting and waiting, because people think that, and you meet all these people all the time on your show, and they think it's so glamorous.
No,
They're just
hurry up and wait.
Exactly. Yeah. And I asked him this question because I believe genius leaves clues. I was like, how do you prepare? How do you get ready when the director? You're just sitting here for hours, and then the director calls on you. How do you get ready? And he was like, Jim, I don't have to get ready. I stay ready. And I'm like, wow, it's good to be Will Smith.
It's hard to stay ready for 6 hours of waiting.
Exactly. But that's just who he is, because I believe the life you live are the lessons you teach. The life you live are the lessons you teach others. But going back to his dominant question, his family was there also at the same time visiting the set, and from West Philly, you know the song.
Yes.
And we're all outside and shivering. And when he wasn't shooting, he would bring us blankets. He would make hot chocolate and bring it to us. He would crack jokes. He would live that dominant question, because the life he lives. How do I make this moment even more magical? Now, before it was like, how do I make this moment magical? Then we played with it like even more magical, presuming it is already magical and amazing. And so these questions we ask are very important. Now, there are 3 questions when I said there's turning knowledge into power that I want everyone to obsess about. I mean, this will make you a master.
Okay.
And if you get it, this is it. 3 questions to turn knowledge into power, because knowledge alone is potential power. Number 1, how can I use this? When you're listening to this podcast moving forward, every time you listen to it, I want you to ask yourself, how can I use this? Get obsessed about this, like even write it down. And this is where your mind can be very creative, because in here I teach the power of note-taking, because people don't realize this. When you listen to a podcast or you go to a summit or an event or have a great conversation with somebody, within 2 days, 80% of it is gone. We forget it. They call it the forgetting curve. And one of the ways to retain it is by taking notes, exactly what you're doing. Now, I encourage people to take notes a very specific way, is to put a line right down the page, and on the left side of the page, I want you to take notes, and on the right side, I want you to make notes. So on the left side of the page, you're taking notes. You're capturing.
Lists,
Right, you're capturing
quotes,
information.
yeah.
You're like, this is how Jim remembers his name. This is how Jim reads a book a day, or whatever it is. So you're on the left side, you're capturing, but on the right side, you're creating. Now that's a subtle difference. On the left side, you're note taking. On the right side, you're note making. What's the difference? Again, on the left side, you're taking notes. You're writing down the quotes and the strategies, the processes. But on your right side, what you're doing, the right side creativity, instead of your mind being distracted when you're listening, have it be focused on, how can I use this? On the right side is where you're writing your impressions of what you're learning. How can I use this? Another great question, second dominant question I would ask, is not only how can I use it, because you come up with all these answers, just like you start seeing pug dogs everywhere. It's like, oh, this is how I could use this in my relationship. This is how I could use it, in my career. Second question I would ask is, why must I use this? Why must I use this? We know one of the people that endorsed my book, he's on your show, is Simon Sinek. And one of my favorite books, I'm going to mention a lot of books, including your own, start with why, right? And so why must I use this? So once you have all these ideas of how can I use this, why must I use this? Because if you don't have the reasons, you won't get the results.
Right. You won't care enough about it.
Exactly. Reasons reap results. I'm going to give a lot of people a lot of quickisms here, because it goes from your head to your heart to your hands. You could affirm things in your head all day, set goals in your head all day, but if you're not acting with your hands, you're procrastinating, putting things off, check in with your second age, which is your heart, which are the emotions, right? Because we are not logical, we are biological. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, this chemical soup drives us to act. Just like people don't buy logically, they don't fall in love logically, they do these things emotionally. So find your emotions. And in this book, we really uncover and I decode motivation. Not motivation getting hyped up and dancing on chairs and then the next day not changing. We figured out this formula of sustainable motivation in this book. But the second question is, go back to, why must I use this? Because if you don't have the why, you won't do the what. And then finally, the third question. First question, how can I use this? Write all the answers down, think about that. Second question, why must I use it? Gives you the energy and the fuel and the drive to do it. And finally, when will I use this? When will I use this? Because we know that one of the most important performance productivity tools that we have is our calendar.
Yeah.
Right? If it's not in our calendar, it just doesn't get done.
Yeah.
How many people will go, you put doctor's appointments there, you put, PTA meetings, you put meetings with your investor there, but are you scheduling your workout? Are you scheduling your meditation time? Are you scheduling your journal or your white space just so you can be a creative thinker? And if we don't write it down, it comes at the end, and then you just, you never get to it. And so those are the three dominant questions that you want to ask to take knowledge and turn them into power.
Wow.
So as you're going through this, ask those questions, you'll get better answers, and you'll learn it deeper. It'll deepen into your nervous system so much more.
Before we continue this video, make sure to subscribe below and turn on the notification bell right now so you don't miss out on these great videos every single day.
I've got things I do each day, and I've got things I do on a weekly basis. I'm less good about the annual vacation. I've never done it.
It's so hard.
I've been doing science 25 years. I'm sure some of my former relationships will be like, that's right, we never actually took a proper vacation. Yeah, my former girlfriend and I was like, we'd go to like Paris, England, we would Germany, and I was giving talks and talks, and then I'd get sick, and then one day she was so understanding. It's like I still feel some guilt about that, but we would take an afternoon and go to a gallery, but then I was like right back at it,
That's been my life too.
It's hard. I mean, you have to find that balance, Luckily I was in my 30s then, and when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can get away with less serotonin in your system. But
now you need more serotonin.
Oh, absolutely.
So what do you do every day to get more serotonin, or weekly?
Sleeping an adequate amount is key. The practice that served me the best has not been a meditative practice. There are two practices. One is called yoga nidra, which doesn't involve any movement. It literally means yoga sleep. This was introduced to me about 5 years ago.
Just laying on your back?
You listen to a script. There are a lot of scripts on YouTube, and it teaches you there's some breathing involved, but it's really a body scan. You learn to go into deep relaxation.
Yes.
I do this once or twice a day. If I wake up and I haven't had enough sleep, I do it first thing.
5-10 minutes.
There's a 20-minute script I like. There is a 10-minute script that's out there too. I can give you the links to these if people are interested in them. I have no affiliation with any yoga nidra businesses, but I love what the practice, because I feel like I recover the sleep I didn't get. I then feel really alert. In the afternoon, if I'm feeling tired, I'll do yoga nidra. It also involves some intentions, which has a kind of pseudo self-hypnosis component. And I have a colleague, David Spiegel, in the Department of Psychiatry, who does clinical hypnosis. And these intentions that we do in states of deep relaxation are known to have positive effects on thinking and action. They are in pain mitigation and even breast cancer outcomes. David's work has shown that. So we're not talking stage hypnosis with like a pendant. We're talking
Self-hypnosis.
Self-hypnosis or medical hypnosis.
Well, it's like you said, deliberate thought as opposed to reactive thought.
Right. And you're teaching your body and brain to go into deep relaxation deliberately. You're doing it. And that's, I think, a power
You're
tool.
saying, okay, lay down, relax your body, relax your face, calm, breathe slower. You're telling yourself to do it.
You're using the body to control the mind. That's again, and you're deliberately turning your thoughts off. Most people can't do that. And so for me, Yoga Nidra has been a absolute amplifier, accelerator, whatever you want to call it, on my career and life and well-being. It also gets you better at falling asleep, because one of the reasons why people have trouble falling asleep is they can't turn their thoughts off. So you're training your nervous system how to do this. I should say, because it sounds a little bit out there in the kind of new agey space, there are several studies, imaging studies, positron emission tomography studies, and others looking at Yoga Nidra specifically. This wasn't work done by my lab, although we are exploring it in my lab as a tool for stress mitigation, anxiety mitigation. But these studies show that 30 minutes, I believe it was, of Yoga Nidra resets the levels of dopamine in an area of the brain called the basal ganglia, which prepares the brain and body for action. So these deep relaxation states, even if we're wide awake still, allow the nervous system to reset so that it can get back into action. So for the go-getters, if you want to have a long career, you want to high perform your whole career, you want to have tools that allow you to reset that dopamine level, because that is accomplished, that has a huge effect, on buffering adrenaline, as we said earlier. But in addition to that, serotonin is what resets the dopamine pathway. So now there's sort of what we're seeing is kind of a logic to it. You need to alternate rest and effort. You need to reward effort. You need to understand
with rest.
So there's Yoga Nidra, and I would say the best time to do it is first thing in the morning, before you go to sleep at night, or any time of day. In other words, I believe everyone should have some deep relaxation process that's deliberate, that doesn't involve ingesting anything,
Not food or wine or
For some people, a drink is fine. I'm focused on behavioral tools. Supplements and drugs have their place, and so there are clinically depressed people that need a boost in dopamine or need a boost in serotonin. And I think, even though drugs like Prozac get a bad rap, those drugs have also saved millions of lives. There's just an appropriate dose and context, and some people shouldn't take them.
Well, people also, what I'm hearing you say is should take them when you need them, when you're unable to physically create those habits for yourself and routines for yourself. But then once you take it, you're always going to need it until you can learn how to behaviorally change your actions.
That's right.
Right?
It's like the obese person that finally, if they really can't move, right? Maybe they do need to do some sort of surgical procedure, or they need to do something that. But then once they start exercising, I believe you always want to go behaviors. Focus on behaviors first. Get the behaviors dialed in. Everything we've talked about today is free. Everything we talked about is self-directed. So it's behaviors. Then I think diet is very important, or nutrition. I think supplementation definitely has its place. I think we are past the ridiculous idea of the 80s and 90s, like, oh, can't you get everything from what you eat? No one can even agree on what we're supposed to eat.
Right.
Every scientist I know who's serious about their mind and body takes supplements.
Yeah.
I don't have a supplement company. I'm going to be very clear about this, but they all have their regime for them. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a tide change now where supplements are no longer being thought of as this like niche thing that only bodybuilders and like people who are selling snake oil are about. There is a lot of snake oil out there, but there are also some supplements that are powerful for the sorts of things that we're talking about, for sleep and all the others. We could talk about them if you like, but I think it's behaviors, nutrition, supplements, And then there is a place for prescription drugs. There are people that are clinically depressed and suicidal and need help, and they need to talk to a board-certified MD and get a hold of, in some cases, the opinion of whether or not they should take these drugs. Doesn't mean they should take them forever, but we tend to jump to drugs, and that's why I think a lot of those drugs, they won't change your behaviors. You still need to change your behaviors.
That's the easy way out to start, is taking the drugs,
Right.
but what you should be doing is the behavioral nutrition supplements. If you do those 3 things first, you should start to feel better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sunlight in the morning, the things we've talked about.
Breathing, relaxing, all these things.
I have a friend, he's an MD, and he says it beautifully. He says, better living through chemistry still requires better living.
Yeah.
Right? There is no pill or substance or psychedelic that's going to completely rewire you. It's not even clear what that would look like.
Right.
And then there's a 5th category that's starting to emerge now, which is brain-machine interface. Things like devices that people put on and to adjust their brain waves, enhance plasticity. There are great devices out there for what I would say reading and measuring from the nervous system, monitoring sleep, for instance, monitoring brain waves. We're still in the infancy of good commercially available brain-machine interface, but I think that will eventually show up. The other thing, because you asked about tools each day, I have a daily practice of doing yoga nidra. For me, that's my form of meditation and sort of serotonin reset. The other one is gratitude. I know gratitude gets a lot of discussion nowadays, but I always want to point out that gratitude it's not complacency. People think it's navel gazing, but it has been shown to increase levels of serotonin in the brain.
It's a science. Now I did an interview with Dr. Laurie Santos. She's the Yale professor, science of happiness at Yale.
Oh, yeah.
I had her on, and I was like, okay, what are the top scientific reasons for happiness right now that are proven? And she was like, gratitude is like one of the top 3 or 4. It's like, okay, so this is not woo-woo anymore. No. She's like, no, this is scientifically proven that gratitude makes you happier.
I think gratitude is wonderful. It resets the system so that you can be in pursuit. I think gratitude sounds like complacency, and people are like, oh, I don't want to be a navel gazer. Then I'm not going to be content. Then people fear that they're not going to be in
complacent.
pursuit.
They're like, I'm just happy with where I'm at.
But serotonin resets dopamine, which puts you back in the fight and allows you to fight longer and further. And I guess I'm doing this a lot today, but I've had the great privilege of doing some work with these communities. If you look at high performers in these very high risk, high consequence special operations communities, they have gratitude practices.
Really?
They do. And they incorporate them. And so, people think there's like some secret sauce or there's something, and they are very unique individuals and very special individuals, but they have those practices.
They have the same tools that anyone can use.
That's right.
We all have these tools. You do yoga nidra, you do gratitude practice throughout the day. What else do you do?
So the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is is a gratitude. No matter what pops in my head, I reorient to being grateful that I'm waking up. I mean, I've had a number of close calls in life. I've lost people like everybody. I'm 45, so, seen a lot of babies born, seen a lot of people die. That's just the way it goes. But I express some gratitude for just waking up.
Yes.
And that puts me in forward motion. And then I can do things like make my bed, reward that I'm not doing something else, that, and start getting into things. And I tend to reward relationships in a big way. My dog's 10 years old. I raised him since he was a puppy. He's a bulldog. He's probably getting to the end. I try and really just focus on the sheer pleasure of having a bulldog. They're such characters, and him in particular. Relationships of all kinds. Like if I spend time with people, or I just try and think about mentors, people that got me where I am. I do that all the time. And I'm pretty, as you probably imagine, I talk fast, I work a lot, I'm pretty intense, but I finish my days now not feeling ground out and depleted. Doesn't mean I'm grateful for every opportunity or everything that comes my way. I have to be conscious of it, but I think a deliberate practice of relishing or enjoying what we have is so powerful, and not just going through the motions.
If we're not enjoying it and we're just waiting for the end result, we're going to be unhappy.
Well, absolutely. And there's something called dopamine reward prediction error, where people work, or they expect something to be great. And as you do that, you actually raise the level of dopamine that's required to make it feel good when you get there. This is why people, achieve great things and kill themselves.
It's crazy, right?
The failure to respect these neurochemical pathways and these neural pathways, is actually, I mean, it's basically throwing away everything that we were given, in my opinion. And I don't want to give the impression that people have to follow these protocols because I'm talking about them. We were all given these. You know, people will sometimes ask me, they'll say, you know, is there an app or a product around this? And I just say, look, Mother Nature has the patent for this, you know? Whatever people's beliefs, you know, this stuff was built into us for whatever reason. And we can use these different neurochemical pathways to organize our life in a way that really serves us and the people around us best.
Yeah.
And the gratitude practice can be 1 second long. It can be 10 minutes if you want. People do love and kindness meditation. I've never done that. I've always had a hard time being in meditation for a long period of time. I'm not good at mental visualization. So I tend to gear more towards behaviors.
Wait, you're a neuroscientist. You're not good at mental visualization.
Well, I try, but I think we all differ in our ability to hold on to a mental imagery, and mine's kind of fleeting. So I tend to write things out. But yeah, gratitude practice, try and get sun in my eyes. I mean, exercise, I love. I'm fortunate that I love exercise and training. I think that got into me young. For people that's harder to do, then you just build these things up through subjective reward.
Yeah. If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.